Chapter 990. Right now, the many experts in the square were also astonished by Fang Xinjian's strength. On the other side, a figure shot towards the highest stone platform like a cannonball with a bang, directly smashing onto the stone platform, stirring up a cloud of smoke and dust. Looking at the figure in the dust, the fourth prince smiled. "Lilia, you've finally returned from the plains. You're already at Tier 5 of the divine level? Not bad, not bad." The person in the dust was Lilia. Right now, there was an additional determination on her face that had not been there in the past. Clearly, the experiences in the plains had tempered her martial will. Looking at the fourth prince and the others, Lilia bowed slightly and said, "Sirs, may I ask if my teacher is here? Why is this Divine Treasures meeting being held? The implications of this meeting are far too great. Even the Mage Association and the Holy See of Truth will be sending people over. Once a conflict breaks out, the situation will deteriorate and be hard to resolve." Hearing Lilia's question, the fourth prince sighed and shook his head. "To be honest, I don't support this Divine Treasures meeting either. Although our strength has improved tremendously, we're still a far cry from the 12 Mage Kings from the Mage Association, the many Guardian Kings from the Holy See of Truth, and the 3 Saints. However, your master insisted on it, so it's being held. He should have his own considerations." The fourth prince sighed again and continued, "A few days ago, Xinjiang withdrew all of his clone's powers and then went into his final seclusion. However, he'll definitely return today." Just as the few of them were speaking, a majestic chi activity descended from the sky, and 2 light pillars, one gold and one black, came crashing down like meteors. Seething martial will radiated out in all directions, as if announcing its existence without any restraints. Looking at the 2 people who walked out slowly from the light pillars, countless people gasped once again. "It's the Gold Mage King and the Black Mage King. The people from the Mage Association are here as well. The disaster in the imperial capital previously must have been related to them, right? To think that they still dare to come." Looking at these 2 legends, top-notch Tier 5 divine level experts, all the divine level experts present wore grim countenances. If they knew that these 2 people had already joined Fang Xinjian's side, they would probably be even more astonished. Although the Black Mage King appeared to be extraordinary, he was actually very nervous. Sigh. The timing for this Divine Treasures meeting is really bad. The Red Mage King has died in battle, while the Grey Mage King and the Purple Mage King are nowhere to be seen. As for the Chaos Witch, it's fine as long as she doesn't go against us. It's good that she doesn't go against us. At this moment, the Black Mage King felt a hint of sorrow in his heart. Right now, the Mage Association was only left with him and the Gold Mage King in terms of battle prowess. If the holy, the divine level, and now the wood. If the holy, the divine level, the holy wood, the holy wood. The mage. The dragon, the mage, The 2 Mage Kings stood behind a stone platform and no longer showed any signs of life. It was as if they were unwilling to communicate with the people present. More and more experts from different continents appeared, and even the northern barbarians had sent their representatives. They were barbarian warriors who wore beast skins, had sturdy muscles, and had eyes filled with wildness. The representative in the lead was clearly also a Tier 3 or 4 divine level expert. Many countries under the rule of the Holy See of Saint had also sent their representative. The experts from the royal families of the many kingdoms in the north stood on different stone platforms. Time passed until evening. The number of people in the square did not decrease in the slightest. Instead, it became increasingly lively. The densely packed crowd squeezed together like sardines in a can. However, as time passed by, more and more people started to make a ruckus. Clearly, they were feeling a little impatient with the wait. Just then, Tyrant and the others abruptly raised their heads and looked toward the sky. The black mage king's and gold mage king's eyes also gleamed as they looked toward the sky. An unprecedented sense of danger gushed up in their hearts. It was a sense of danger that was hard to hide despite the fact that there was nowhere in the world for them to escape to. A name appeared in their minds at the same time. He's here. In the next moment, a series of hymns descended from the sky. No one knew when it started, but the sky had already been covered by endless white. The entire sky seemed to be filled with the singing of countless saintesses and holy spirits, and the white, auspicious clouds together formed a vast kingdom, as if the kingdom of heaven had appeared in the human world. Amidst the boundless white light, 10 figures slowly walked out from the kingdom of heaven. A holy power, as vast as the mountains and seas, emanated from their bodies. The power of the God of Truth seemed to have filled every inch of space in the entire imperial capital in an instant. Everyone felt as if they were being enveloped by a pure and warm power. Following that, another wave of surging energy emanated from the 10 figures, enveloping the entire imperial capital like a tsunami. There were so many experts present, and almost all the elites in the world were gathered here. However, before this endless power that blotted out the sky, other than Tier 5 divine-level experts, the rest of the people were almost unable to control their bodies. As the 10 people's powers erupted, white light burst out from their bodies. They turned into 10 huge white light figures, surrounding the entire imperial capital as if they were spectators. Light ribbons that were several tens of kilometers long extended out from their backs, floating in midair like a pair of wings. Guardian kings? A total of 10 guardian kings? The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch looked at this scene in astonishment. He looked at the 10 giants of light, unable to believe his eyes. The 4th prince's countenance turned pale as well. How can this be? Aren't the 3 saints of the Holy See of Truth currently having an internal strife? Why would half of the Guardian Kings come here? The Guardian Kings represented the Holy See of Truth's ultimate power aside from the Pope and the Saint. Each Guardian King had the power to easily wipe out an entire country. They also possessed the strongest divine arts and were the nightmares of all countries. Right now, a total of 10 Guardian Kings had appeared in the sky above the imperial capital, bringing about a shocking effect. It could be said that the many experts who had entered the imperial capital during the day, regardless of whether they were Tyrann's group, the Sea Monarch, the various tribes of the Northern Barbarians, the Northern Royal Family, or even the Mage Association, all appeared pale and powerless before the 10 Guardian Kings. However, at the next moment, an even more astonishing glow was emitted from the center of the kingdom of heaven. It was as if the entire world had turned pure white. 3 indistinct figures walked out from a light door in succession. The majestic power seemed to be the center of the entire universe. Looking at these 3 silhouettes, Tyrant was almost moaning as he said, 3. Great. Saint. Chapter 991. If any one of the Guardian Kings could easily wipe out an entire country, then the simultaneous appearance of 10 Guardian Kings outside the Holy See of Truth would be enough to shock the entire world. It was something that rarely happened in history. Right now, with the 3 saints appearing in the sky above the imperial capital, everyone present felt dizzy. It could be said to be a major historical event that had never happened before. The immortal child, the extraordinary son, and Seiko Kaitian. These 3 were characters who stood at the top of the world. Even though Fang Xinjian had single-handedly slain over 10 divine-level experts from the plains and suppressed the Heavenly Lion King back then, most people felt that his strength was only slightly higher than that of the Guardian Kings. It was impossible for him to be a match for the 3 saints. The 3 saints were top-notch characters that only the Pope could truly suppress. However, right now, the Pope had gone missing, his whereabouts unknown, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Many mage kings from the Mage Association had left, and their influence was on the decline. The 3 saints were now unrivaled experts in the hearts of countless people. In fact, most people believed that if it was not because the three saints were fighting for the position of the Pope, causing the Church to be torn apart internally, there would probably be no one in the world who would be able to fend off the Holy See of Truth. The astral ancestor looked at the lumps of light in the sky with a bitter expression. How could this be? To think that even the three saints have put aside their differences and descended together. To think that the divine Sun Emperor's treasures have such a great allure? Right now, the fourth prince's eyes were no longer as calm as before. Instead, they were filled with extreme nervousness and worry. Although he had been worried that things would easily go out of control when Fang Xinjian held the Divine Treasures meeting, he had thought that it would be great if the Church would at most send 3 or 4 guardian kings. However, not only had the huge crocodile come, but a dinosaur had also arrived. The three saints had descended at the same time. This was something that had never happened before. What should we do? If this were to go on, the situation will be hard to salvage. The Gold Mage King and Black Mage King exchanged a glance, their eyes filled with intense wariness. As the archenemies of the Holy See of Truth, the Mage Association's Mage Kings were naturally very clear on how powerful and troublesome the three saints were. Especially now that the three of them had joined forces, who in the entire continent could stop them. The Black Mage King looked at the white circle of light in the sky and sighed. He communicated with the Gold Mage King through his martial will. It's a pity that, if the three of them join forces, there's probably no one in the world who will be able to stop them. Back in the day, our Mage Association was so impressive. If the Silver Mage King, Green Mage King, and Yellow Mage King were still around, we might also be a match for the three saints. The Gold Mage King frowned and replied, "It's useless to think about these now. The three saints are definitely not here for something as simple as the Divine Sun Emperor. We must also make preparations early." The two looked at each other and saw the intention to retreat in each other's eyes. However, they also felt fortunate. Fortunately, they had already anticipated the dangers of today's grand meet, so they had only sent their doppelgangers with 50% of their strength. Even if they were killed by the three holy sons, they would only lose half of their strength. Although it was painful, they would not despair. The Black Mage King thought, after today's battle, the Holy See of Truth will probably truly dominate over the continent. We might have to head to the Western Land as well. The Sea Monarch's heart was already trembling, and his entire body was almost trembling incessantly. Such power! Such majesty of martial will! And the ether particle waves contained in that white light. To think that the top-notch experts in the continent are this powerful? Will there still be anyone who can be a match for them? Just as everyone was trembling in fear from the prowess displayed by the Holy See of Truth and at a loss of what to do, the figure in the middle of the three figures walked out. The white light on his body slowly faded away, revealing his original appearance. It was a man with his eyes tightly shut and a cold expression. He was like an ice mountain. He was one of the three great saints, the phenomenal saint. The extraordinary Sun was one of the three saints. He was in charge of the law and specialized in dealing with traitors and heretics. He was a zealous believer who focused on sensing the God of truth. At the age of 10, he had pierced his own eyes. At the age of 12, he had pierced his ears. At the age of 15, he had pulled out his tongue. At the age of 18, he had requested the Guardian King to seal his senses of smell and touch as well. Despite having lost his 5 senses, he was still able to reach the pinnacle and become a top-notch expert in the continent. This in itself showed how terrifying he was. Right now, the extraordinary Sun had an overwhelming aura. Each and every move he made seemed to have become one with the entire sky. It was as if he was the embodiment of the world. The 2 white circles of light behind him kept on expanding and contracting, emitting unbelievable and astonishing powers. Streams of ether particles spewed out from the circles of light, as if wanting to fill up the entire world. Within a short period of time, The ether particle density in the entire imperial capital had increased to over 10 times what it had been previously. Looking at the two circles of light behind the extraordinary sun that kept on expanding and releasing, the immortal child's eyes narrowed slightly. He thought, when did the extraordinary sun get his hands on two white Emperor Zenith swords? He secretly looked toward Seiko Kaitian. He was a handsome man who seemed to have gathered all the spiritual chi in the world. Right now, he was looking at the extraordinary sun with an indifferent expression. Compared to the extraordinary sun's ruthlessness and brutality, Seiko Kaitian had always been the one that the immortal child could not see through. Right now, the fact that he had handed the white Emperor Zenith swords to the extraordinary sun made the immortal child even more perplexed. However, the extraordinary sun had already taken action. He turned toward the Black Mage King and the Gold Mage King, and seething white light came gushing down like a waterfall. Containing his will, he transmitted it into everyone's consciousness. Today, all the evil forces in the world have gathered? Excellent. This saves me a lot of effort. Especially the rats from the Mage Association. Since when did they dare to come out? As he spoke, he tapped out with a finger, and the distorted space instantly turned into a sphere, wrapping up the Black Mage King and the Gold Mage King's bodies completely. Heaven-flicking finger! The immortal child bellowed inwardly. This is an ultimate move from the 24 doctrines of divine retribution that only a Tier 6 divine-level expert can perform. The 24 Doctrines of Divine Retribution was a classic legacy from the Holy See of Truth Tribunal. It recorded the unrivaled martial path of the Holy See of Truth, and it was an ultimate martial path that only the saints who were in charge of the tribunal could cultivate. Right now, the heaven-flicking finger that the extraordinary sun performed was an ultimate move that only a Tier 6 divine-level expert could perform. This meant that the extraordinary sun had clearly reached Tier 6 of the divine level. That's right, that's right. The immortal child reacted. He has 2 white Emperor Zenith swords and has a total of 14 sections. His strength has soared tremendously, so of course he can clear the hurdle of Tier 6 of the divine level. Back then, with just 1 white Emperor Zenith sword and the activation of 7 sections, Fang Xinjian had been able to go head-on against Erbian before he had traversed universes and not be at a disadvantage. Right now, how powerful would the extraordinary sun, who had obtained 14 sections, be? Moreover, he had also reached Tier 6 of the divine level. Chapter 992. Sighing inwardly, the immortal child could only think, "Thank goodness I didn't tell them about my relationship with Fang Xinjian." Right now, he was extremely thankful that he had not told the 2 saints everything and had instead chosen to make use of them to attract the attention of the Quanji 7 people. Otherwise, with the extraordinary sun's personality and current powers, if he were to find out that the immortal child, Fang Xinjian, and even the Mage Association had joined forces, there would definitely be great changes. Simultaneously, as the 2 Mage Kings' figures were encompassed by spatial distortions, at the next moment, the location they were at became completely empty. It was as if the location they were at had been completely wiped out, and all matter at that time and place had disappeared without a trace along with the 2 Mage Kings. At the sight of this scene, the immortal child's heart sank. The heaven-flicking finger uses the power of spatial translocation to communicate with the divine powers of the God of universal truth in the 9-tiered heavens. It's an ultimate move that sends the opponent into the 9-tiered heavens to strive for a breakthrough. In such a situation, even if the one being hit is a clone, they can only forcefully strive for a breakthrough. There are almost no means below Tier 6 of the divine level that can fend off this finger. It's still fine if it's Tier 3 or 4 of the divine level, as they can still strive for a breakthrough. However, if a Tier 5 divine level expert is sent to strive for a breakthrough without any preparation, they'll almost definitely die. This is a powerful move that the Judgment Division created. It's a technique that Tier 6 divine level experts use to kill the weak. All cultivators below Tier 6 of the divine level will be killed with a single strike when faced with this move. Even though the immortal child knew the secrets behind the heaven-flicking finger, he was still extremely astonished at the sight of this move, let alone the other people present. In their opinion, the extraordinary sun had merely tapped out with a finger, and the extremely domineering spatial distortions had wiped out the two mage kings. How shocking and terrifying was this! The people who had been wiped out were not ordinary Tom, Dick, or Harry. They were the two mage kings who had dominated the world for several decades and had even fought against the Pope when they were at Tier 1 of the divine level before the world's metamorphosis. To think that they were wiped out just like that. Seeing that the two mage kings had been wiped out so easily, the sea monarch felt a chill run down his spine. Regardless of whether it was the gold mage king or the black mage king, the commotion from their appearances could be said to be world-shaking. The sea monarch reckoned that if he were to fight against either one of them, he would only have a 20% to 30% chance of winning. However, these two pinnacle figures had been killed by the extraordinary sun with just a finger. The extraordinary sun's finger attack could be said to have shocked everyone. Prince Philip's gaze instantly turned extremely solemn. That finger just now contained the power of spatial translocation? Tier 6 of the divine level? After killing the two guardian kings, the extraordinary sun turned his head and once again faced the direction of the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch. Everyone has the right to annihilate a barbaric cult. In an instant, he stretched out his palm again. His 5 fingers moved, and it was as if a white lotus flower had exploded in an instant. An indescribably powerful spatial ripple had already spread out from his fingertip. Almost at the very first moment, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch let out a sharp cry and turned into a bright stream of fiery light, charging out toward the eastern horizon like a meteor. He chose to escape right away, not having the courage to go up against the extraordinary sun. Simultaneously, Tyrant, the fourth prince, Prince Philip, Lan Yu, the astral ancestor, and the blue sacred moonlight made their moves simultaneously. 6 streams of majestic powers soared into the sky. Faced against the extraordinary sun, no one held back. All of them went all out at this moment. Blue moon, huge beasts that could engulf the heavens, ghostly sword cheese, white divine domain. The 6 experts unleashed the powers of their divine countries concurrently, and it was as if 6 worlds were smashing out toward the extraordinary sun. Violent powers gathered together, and at this moment, it seemed as if they could even pierce a hole through the sky. Faced with the 6 worlds that were smashing out toward him, the expression on the extraordinary sun's face did not change at all. There was neither sorrow nor joy on his face. However, his other hand had already been raised up, clenching his fingers into a fist. At the next moment, the white Emperor Zenith Sword's powers gushed into this fist. The small fist was like an extreme point, engulfing and releasing the white Emperor Zenith Sword's powers crazily. Then it started to pulse furiously, as if a world was going to explode within it. The 24 Doctrines of Divine Retribution, World Creation Irregularity. The immortal child looked at the move that the extraordinary sun had performed, and the name of this move appeared in his mind. It was an explosive power that imitated the world's creation in the legends. It was said to be the most ferocious move in the 24 Doctrines of Divine Retribution. If the 6 divine countries that Tyrant and the other 5 had unleashed were like 6 worlds that were smashing out toward the extraordinary sun, then the world creation irregularity that the extraordinary sun had performed was like a great explosion that could create and destroy worlds and reforge a world. The 2 gushes of powers collided, and even the air was vaporized completely. No one could hear any sound. The world creation irregularity unleashed an endless burst of light and heat, channeling into the 6 divine countries incessantly. Flames and light instantly incinerated the worlds within the entire divine countries. Lan Yu's moon divine country was the first to collapse and dissipate, followed by the fourth prince's netherworld hell. It was also incinerated by the endless yang flames and explosions. The white light that erupted from the world creation irregularity channeled into the six divine countries wildly, causing them to explode one after another. The distorted space was once again returned to the world. Amidst the explosions that were filled with white light, the extreme powers caused a stretch of darkness to fill up the sky. At the next moment, invisible spatial ripples spread out in all directions. Wherever the ripples passed by, the space would first be stretched out and then shrink back. The six divine countries had all been destroyed by the world creation irregularity, and their space was once again returned to this world. The effects of force were mutual. The divine countries that Tyrant and the other five had controlled to collide against each other were now destroyed. Their countenances turned pale, and they let out stifled snorts. They received a rebound from the divine country's powers, and countless cracks appeared on their bodies. The extraordinary sun broke through the joint attacks of the six people with a single move, and his other move, the heaven-flicking finger, tapped onto the sacred fire order's patriarch. In less than 0.001 seconds, the sacred fire order's patriarch darted out a distance of several tens of kilometers. However, he was still covered up by the heaven-flicking finger's spatial distortions. Before he could even let out a cry, he had completely disappeared from this world. Even the clones he had left behind in various parts of the world had stepped into the nine-tiered heavens under the God of Universal Truth's divine powers, starting to strive for Tier 6 of the divine level. From the moment he appeared until now, the extraordinary sun had made a total of 3 moves. He had wiped out the Gold Mage King, the Black Mage King, and the Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch. He had also stopped and dealt Tyrant and the other 5 people with serious injuries. The other 2 saints behind the Patriarch had yet to make a move. This caused the hearts of everyone present to sway. Regardless of whether it was their bodies or their spirits, they all felt a sense of complete submission. The extraordinary sun once again faced the fourth prince, and his martial will spread out in seething waves, causing his voice to ring out in all directions. It was as if a god had sent down a decree from the heavens. Coupled with the series of actions he had taken earlier, no one was able to muster up any will to resist. Cincoda Empire's fourth prince, hand over Fong Xinjian. The extraordinary sun said slowly, "He has blasphemed the gods, spread evil, and disrupted the peace and tranquility of the entire world. This demon must receive the gods' judgment." Chapter 993. Right now, the entire sky above the imperial capital was as bright as day. 10 giants of light, each with a height of over several kilometers, surrounded the entire imperial capital. White light encompassed their bodies, and 2 streams of white light flew out from their backs like a pair of wings. As the white Emperor Zenith's sword continued to spurt out more and more ether particles, the bodies of the giants of light grew increasingly larger. White circles of light even started to appear on their heads. Right now, the auras that each of the giants of light displayed could be said to be able to engulf the sun and the moon and seize the mountains and rivers. Right now, they were surrounding the imperial capital, forming layers of spatial barriers that encompassed the entire imperial capital, making it impossible for anyone to escape. If the giants of light that the 10 guardian kings had turned into were already enough to cause one to feel despair, then the figures of the 3 saints on the heavenly country that was formed from layers of white auspicious clouds in the sky above the imperial capital would make one feel like dropping to their knees and prostrating themselves in worship. Waves of white light were emitted from the 3 of them. They stood on the white clouds as if they were looking down on the mortal world from heaven. This was especially so for the 2 circles of light formed from the white Emperor Zenith's sword on the extraordinary sun's back. The ether particles that gushed out had already caused the ether particle density in the entire imperial capital to reach over 100 times, and it was still increasing rapidly. Hearing the extraordinary sun's words, everyone's countenances turned grim. However, who would be able to put up a resistance against the powers that the extraordinary sun had displayed? In everyone's eyes, the powers that the Church had displayed right now were sufficient to wipe out the entire world. Just then, a stream of pitch-black sword chi suddenly soared into the sky from the depths of the palace. It cut across the sky and slashed out fiercely toward the extraordinary sun, who was in the sky, with a force that could shatter the clouds and sky. Faced with this soaring sword chi, the extraordinary sun let out a cold laugh and tapped out lightly with his finger. With an explosive crackle, it was as if a myriad of thunderbolts had exploded in the sky at the same time. With the spot where the extraordinary sun's fingertip and the sword chi collided as the center, streams of black spatial gaps extended out in all directions like lightning. That was the collision of two forces, which directly squeezed out the usually invisible spatial cracks. These two forces were simply comparable to the collision of planet. At the next moment, a pitch-black figure appeared behind the phenomenal saint. The figure's 5 fingers were pressed together and extended out, and his entire right hand was like an unrivaled sharp sword, piercing out fiercely toward the phenomenal saint's back. Astonishing sword light radiated from that person's arm. Wherever the sword light passed by, large areas of the city walls and buildings in the imperial capital seemed to have been sliced apart by invisible sharp swords, revealing their smooth sides. Just the sword light emitted was already so powerful, so how powerful was this sword strike? Wherever his arm passed, the space seemed to be torn apart, revealing cracks that looked like black lightning. This was because space couldn't withstand this power and directly exposed a spatial crack. This was a power that could destroy a small planet condensed into a single point at the microscopic level. Its destructive power could simply destroy everything in the world. However, while matter could be destroyed by this sword strike, space could not. The 2 circles of light on the phenomenal saint's back swelled up abruptly, and seething ether particles spurted out, all of them gushing into the phenomenal saint's hands. As this wave of ether particles swelled up, the surrounding space seemed to swell up intensely. The energy changes from the expanding light circles could be compared to the solar storm on a fixed star. At the next moment, the extraordinary sun tapped out with his fingertip once again, and the swollen space encompassed the black figure before him. The collapsed space in the surroundings was once again compressed together, and countless spatial distortions encompassed the black figure in layers. Originally, the space had been shattered by a sword attack. The overly ferocious powers had exposed the cracks between the spatial fragments. Right now, the phenomenal saint was able to use his powers that far surpassed the other parties, compressing these spatial fragments together once again. It was another heaven-flicking finger. At the next moment, as the extraordinary sun tapped out lightly, the black figure, sword cheese, sword light, and everything else disappeared without a trace. It was as if everything that had happened earlier was just an illusion. However, the countless city walls and buildings in the imperial capital that had been slashed through by the sword light earlier proved that everything that had happened earlier was not an illusion. With a single finger, everything in the world was wiped out. Fang Shijian? He's nothing much. Looking at the black-clothed man who had been wiped out by him with a single finger, the extraordinary sun shook his head and thought, the difference between Tier 5 and 6 of the divine level is still an insurmountable chasm. Right now, who in the entire world can be a match for me? At the thought of this, he turned his gaze toward the immortal child behind him. Immortal child, I've reached Tier 6 of the divine level, and even obtained 14 sections of the White Emperor's Zenith Sword. I've also wiped out the unorthodox forces in the Empire and the south of the world, as well as killed Fang Xinjian. This proves that the previous Pope's prophecy was wrong. This Fang Xinjian won't be able to save the world, nor is he worthy of possessing the White Emperor's Zenith Sword. Right now, I'm the one who has the hope to break through the 7th onslaught and the true candidate to become the future Pope. Despite this, you're still unwilling to hand over the last 7 sections of the White Emperor Zenith Sword to me? To the extraordinary Sun, things like the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures and Fang Xinjian's secrets were nothing in his eyes. No matter how great the backgrounds of the various influences in the world were, could they be more profound than the God of universal truth? To the extraordinary Sun, how could the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures be comparable to the White Emperor Zenith Sword? That was the true number 1 divine equipment in the world. Therefore, he killed Fang Xinjian without any pressure. He did not even have the interest to ask what the other party's objective in organizing the Divine Treasures meeting was, or what the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures were. Right now, the only thing in his eyes was the immortal child's last 7 sections of the White Emperor Zenith Sword. As for the other experts and influences, they were like insignificant dust in his eyes. In the end, the only thing that can go up against the gods is the gods themselves. As for the other unorthodox forces, they're just short-lived meteors that disappear in a flash. The immortal child smiled and said calmly, "If you can really wipe out the Empire and the Mage Association, spreading the gods' radiance to every corner of the world, I'll naturally be willing to offer the White Emperor Sword to you." Simultaneously, the imperial capital was in a state of despair. Even their strongest expert, Sword Overlord Fang Xinjian, was not a match for the extraordinary Sun. How could they possibly have the will to resist? Many people had not expected that Fang Xinjian would not even be able to take a single attack from the extraordinary Sun. He had been defeated just like how the Black Mage King, Gold Mage King, and the Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch had been. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, the extraordinary Sun had not even asked about the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures and had killed so many people. Chapter 994. The Astral Ancestor and the others were dumbfounded, and their minds went blank. Tyron's countenance was also grim, and a hint of despair, like that of a cornered beast, appeared in his eyes. Even Lilia, who had the most confidence in Fang Xinjian, was unable to say a single word. At this moment, the abilities displayed by the Holy Sea of Truth and the extraordinary Sun had surpassed their imagination. Only a hint of doubt flashed on the fourth prince's face. It was because he knew that Fang Xinjian had attained Tier 6 of the divine level. Even if he was not a match for the extraordinary Sun, he should not have been defeated with a single move. Simultaneously, banging sounds rang out consecutively. The weapons in the hands of countless people dropped to the ground, and most of the knights and conferred knights gave up on resisting. The experts from the royal families and factions in the northern countries, who were under the rule of the Holy Sea of Truth, all cheered loudly. Countless people stared in the direction of the extraordinary Sun. They understood that from this moment onward, the entire land might be encompassed by the extraordinary Sun's will. However, at this moment, 6 waves of overwhelming demonic chi soared into the sky from several tens of kilometers away from the imperial capital. They were like 6 seething turbid currents that gathered in the imperial capital's direction. This is... When the extraordinary Sun saw the seething turbid currents, he was also taken aback. It was because after his martial will swept into them, he felt giddy and disoriented, not knowing where he was or where he was headed. They seemed as big as the world, yet also as small as a mustard seed. There was only one possibility for such a situation: the 6 waves of demonic chi had reached the realm of spatial translocation. Where did these demons come from? Sensing the other party's realm, the extraordinary Sun frowned and struck out with a punch. Endless light shone out from his fist. He flicked his 5 fingers, and it was as if a white lotus had exploded. Layers of stacking spatial distortions covered out toward the turbid currents in the sky. It was the heaven-flicking finger that the extraordinary Sun had used to kill the Black Mage King, Gold Mage King, Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch, and Fang Xinjian earlier. However, the heaven-flicking finger, which had always been successful and could easily suppress divine-level experts, returned empty-handed this time around. The distorted space collided fiercely with the 6 waves of demonic cheese. The 2 waves of extremely powerful powers silently dissipated, not unleashing any might. Almost as soon as the 2 forces came into contact, the extraordinary sun sensed that something was wrong. Every time he destroyed a portion of his opponent's power, the heaven-flicking finger would consume 10% of its power. In the blink of an eye, it would be neutralized by the 6 demonic auras. This meant that not only was Fang Xinjian a Tier 6 divine-level expert who had grasped the ability to spatial translocation, but his technique and realm were clearly above Fang Xinjian's. If not for the energy provided by the White Emperor Zenith Sword, he would have been at a complete disadvantage in the earlier exchange. Among the 6 streams of devilish qi, there were 6 indistinct figures. They were none other than the Quanji 7 people who had been hiding for a long time. However, right now, all of them were hidden in the surging black smoke of the 6 streams of demonic qi. No matter how the people present probed with their martial wills, they were unable to get any information from them. It was like the reflection in the water, visible yet untouchable. They seemed to exist yet not exist at the same time. These were the 6 turbid flows that they had spent 3 months condensing for the sake of the divine treasures meeting this time around. After all, Fang Xinjian's appearance and the convening of the divine treasures meeting this time around had set off alarm bells for them. Fang Xinjian and the others had made all sorts of preparations for this day. Naturally, the Quanji 7 people would not remain idle either. The 6 of them had spent a lot of hard work, especially gathering endless negative emotions such as resentment, fury, despair, sorrow, and so on from the world and human countries to condense these 6 turbid flows. The negative emotions gathered from the human world were just a catalyst. By creating a virtual cycle of reincarnation, they channeled these negative emotions into it. Then, they would go through endless cycles of exchanges and struggles, nurturing even more resentment, fury, sorrow, pain. It was like a nuclear reaction, condensing the 6 turbid flows. The overwhelming amount of resentment almost surpassed the total amount of negative emotions in the entire land. Moreover, these 6 turbid flows had also incorporated the Tier 6 divine-level spatial translocation technique. Each square inch of them could almost be as vast as the divine country of a Tier 5 divine-level expert. The 6 turbid flows that cut across the sky and came seething over were equivalent to billions of Tier 5 divine-level experts' divine countries. They also contained endless negative emotions. Through these 2 layers of barriers, as long as the Quanji 7 people hid within, they would not be able to sense the changes within even if they were to use their sudden inspiration. Even their martial wills would not be able to penetrate deep into the turbid flows to sense their existence. If one were to go too deep into the turbid flows, they might even get lost in the almost endless space and be corrupted by negative emotions. Clearly, their contact with Fang Xinjian had raised their guard. This was why they had spent a lot of energy and time to condense these 6 turbid flows. They could almost help them hide themselves and also help them increase their strength. Standing in the deepest part of the 6 turbid flows, Fatso looked at the situation in the imperial capital and laughed out loud. Ha ha ha, the heavens are really on my side. To think that the White Emperor Zenith Sword is in the hands of a junior. Which fellow Taoist will go and retrieve it? Heizi took a step forward, and his entire body emitted an aura that was as warm as spring and could nurture all living things in the world. He smiled and said, "I'll be the one to experience it." Fatso nodded and looked at the other 2 people next to him. One of them was Yuzi, who had a fish head, and the other was a man whose entire body was as white as new, as if he had walked out from a black and white painting. This man, who was dressed in white robes and looked very similar to Heizi, was Shirako, one of the Quanji 7 people. His appearance was extremely similar to Heizi's, but the colors on his body were completely different. If it was said that Heizi was like the Emperor of the Dark Night, then Shirako would be like the sun high up in the sky. He would forever be the center of countless stars, emitting light and heat unrestrainedly to announce his existence. Fatso looked at Yuzi and Shirako and said, "I'll have to trouble the two of you to deal with the 10 guardian kings and the other 2 saints. Tuanzi Haozi and I will hold the line." Therefore, at the next moment, the 3 of them charged out while bringing along 3 waves of overwhelming demonic cheese. The 6 streams of turbid flows were extremely mysterious. Wherever they passed by, there seemed to be no changes to the air or sunlight, as if they did not exist. White light burst out from the 10 giants of light, turning into streams of shock waves that shattered everything in their path. However, they were unable to do anything to the 6 streams of turbid flows. When Yuzi charged toward the giants of light that the 10 guardian kings had transformed into, he unleashed an invisible attack with his heart demon path. Together with the 6 streams of turbid flows, it produced a miraculous effect. Without a sound, waves of invisible waves entangled the bodies of the giants of light. Following this, the giants of light roared toward the sky one after another, and waves of black chi surged out from their bodies. The 6 streams of turbid flows had infected their bodies. Audacious demons! Seeing that the 10 guardian kings were being plotted against, the extraordinary sun let out a furious bellow and grabbed out with his hand. He drew out a longsword from the circle of light on his back and slashed out toward the 3 streams of turbid flows across space. Chapter 995. A sword cut across the air, and countless rays of light seemed to follow along, turning into many sharp swords that clashed out toward the 6 streams of turbid flow. It was the Great Radiant Sword, a great sword art from the 24 doctrines of divine retribution. With this slash, all the light waves in the world seemed to be guided. Countless light waves stacked together, turning into many light swords that were hard to discern with the naked eye. They slashed out fiercely toward Yuzi. In this sword attack, all the light in the world seemed to be guided, and as long as there was no light, the prowess of the sword would be endless. This was a sword move that was said to be able to last forever. Faced with the extraordinary sun's great radiant slash, Heizi let out a cold laugh. He brought along seething turbid flows and blocked before Yuzi. "Junior, your opponent is me." Heizi grabbed out with one hand, and the myriad of turbid flows extended out toward the great radiant sword. In the blink of an eye, the myriad of light swords plunged into the 6 streams of turbid flows. However, it was as if they had dashed into a black hole. All of the light swords sank into the seething turbid flows and immediately fell silent, no longer showing any reaction. The 6 streams of turbid flow had been refined by Blackie and the other 5, and it was unknown how many layers of space there were. There were also countless negative emotions that interacted with each other and linked together, turning it into a chaotic maze. Ordinary attacks would not be able to have any effect on it. Fending off the endless attacks from the great radiant sword with one hand, Heizi clenched the fingers of his other hand tightly, as if grabbing hold of the world before him. "You should receive an attack from me as well." Letting out a long laugh, Heizi struck out a punch. It was the Black Sun Sex Black Sun Great Art's Great Art, Black Deity Knight Emperor Fist. Previously, when Heizi fought against Fang Xinjian, he had reservations and could only unleash powers below Tier 5 of the divine level. However, this time around, he had mastered the 6 streams of turbid flows and had the support of the other 5 people. Therefore, he no longer had any reservations and used the Black Sun Sex Great Art right off the bat. With a single punch, the entire world seemed to shrink incessantly in front of Heizi's fist. The pitch-black fist filled up the entire world in the blink of an eye, as if wanting to crush everything in the world into dust. No one would be able to escape. Following that, the entire world turned dark. The extraordinary sun felt his vision turn black. He could no longer see or sense the existence of anything. From an outsider's perspective, the area within a range of several kilometers of the phenomenal saint and the cloud where he was suddenly encompassed by a stretch of black screen. At the next moment, it turned into a vortex, contracting and shifting into Hazy's palm, turning into a spot the size of a sesame seed. The holy sea of truth is getting worse with each generation. Hazy's black deity Night Emperor Fist was an unrivaled sealing technique. It took the concept that everything in the world would eventually return to darkness, sealing everything in the world in the final darkness and forming a dark star seal. However, just as Hazy let out a cold snort and watched as the dark star in his hand plunged into the turbid flows, streams of piercing light pierced out from the surface of the dark star in his hand like light needles. Endless ether particles extended out from it. If it was said that the entire world, the entire universe, would eventually return to darkness and head toward its end amidst the darkness, then right now, the light that pierced through the darkness in Hazy's hand was like the light of world creation when the world was first created and the universe was restarted. With the reinforcement from the White Emperor Zenith sword, the Holy Sea of Truth's ultimate technique, the world creation irregularity, unleashed an unimaginable prowess. With a great explosion that seemed as if the world was being split apart, it blasted open the black deity Night Emperor Fist seal, allowing the extraordinary sun to break free. The moment he broke free, the extraordinary sun's face was filled with fury. "How dare you bully me, an unorthodox demon?" Rumble. The two light wheels formed by the White Emperor Zenith sword behind him went through a series of changes. The two halos intersected with each other like gears and then spun rapidly. In the center of the light wheels, many light spots swelled up abruptly. It was as if stars had exploded and the sun had been extinguished. One after another, a total of 14 light spots lit up, unleashing an unimaginable aura. It was only at this moment that the extraordinary sun had truly activated the 14 sections of the White Emperor Zenith sword, unleashing his full powers. As the 14 sections of the White Emperor Zenith sword exploded, an earth-shaking aura gushed out from the extraordinary sun's body. Hazy was the first to be affected, and the turbid flow, which had not been affected all this while, started to tremble intensely. His countenance turned extremely grim. He said, "The White Emperor Zenith sword." Clearly, he was filled with extreme hatred toward this world's top divine equipment. The extraordinary sun also made his move. His entire body seemed to be emitting endless light and heat. A power that could compete with the world kept on being unleashed from the light wheels on his back and was then channeled into his fist. Countless ether particles gushed into his fist like a swarm of bugs. Eventually, they turned into a stream of light that could cause the world to explode, piercing out fiercely toward the turbid flow. It was the same world creation irregularity. Now that it was augmented by the 14 sections of the White Emperor Zenith sword, what level of prowess did it reach? Almost the entire land where the imperial capital was started to sink. Countless knights, conferred knights, and even divine-level experts looked at the battlefield in the sky with their eyes and mouths agape, feeling helpless. At this moment they realized that they had lost control over ether particles. The White Emperor Zenith sword's 7 sections were connected, allowing it to draw power from parallel universes, providing it with an almost endless amount of power. The stronger the user's realm was, the more energy it could draw. After the White Emperor Zenith sword's activation sections reached 14, it would be able to dominate the power of ether particles at will. All the external forces in the world would be under its control. The higher the user's realm, the greater the range would be. With the extraordinary sun's realm, this range could probably encompass the entire empire. Sensing the phenomenal saint's punch that seemed as if it could split the world apart, Blackie was no longer able to borrow any powers from the world. He could only rely on his martial will and the turbid flow. However, there was no trace of joy or sorrow on his face, nor was there any hint of panic. The world creation irregularity collided with the turbid flow. The turbid flow, which had not suffered any damage since its appearance, was now being vaporized in large areas by this extremely pure and oppressive energy. 1,000 years ago, back then, the Pope also used this move. Do you think that after 1,000 years have passed, I haven't thought of how to break through it? It was unknown when Heizi's face had been covered by large areas of black shadows, leaving only a pair of eyes that were filled with viciousness. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and spewed out large mouthfuls of black vomit. Countless black viscous substances quickly formed a large area that was like a black lake. Chapter 996. The curse of iniquity was the killing move that Heizi had come up with over the past 1,000 years to neutralize the White Emperor Zenith Sword's endless energy. The black viscous substance seethed and pounced toward the light of the world creation irregularity along the 6 streams of turbid energy. The White Emperor Zenith Sword is the strongest divine equipment of the Holy Sea of Truth. And ether particles are something that the God of universal truth created in the legends. It's because of this that the White Emperor Zenith Sword is able to draw power without any limits and dominate the ether particles. The curse of iniquity that I and the others have come up with is to refine the powers of the other 12 demonic gods, contaminating the purity of the ether particles and turning them into diabolic energy. This will neutralize the White Emperor Zenith Sword's control. The powers of the demonic gods will naturally be countered by the demonic gods. Although the 6 of us can only draw the powers of 6 demonic gods with our spirit roots, it's enough to deal with a dabbler like you. Wherever the black viscous substance passed by, the powers of countless ether particles seemed to lose their spirituality in that instant. They turned into light of various colors and dissipated in midair. What? The extraordinary sun was taken by surprise. He was about to retreat and continue the battle when he realized that his feet had been encompassed by the seething turbid currents and the curse of iniquity's black viscous substance. In the sky, seeing that the extraordinary sun was at a disadvantage, the 10 guardian kings on the ground started to struggle intensely. Streams of light extended out like wings, encompassing the entire central region. Intense divine powers circulated in their bodies, wanting to break through the seal. However, when Yuzi saw this scene, he merely let out a soft bellow. Suppress. In that instant, streams of black fog darted out from within the 10 light figures, turning into huge black hands that came out from their backs and gripped their necks tightly. Streams of crazed expressions flashed in the eyes of the giant light figures. Yuzi's mental demon path had taken root in the depths of their minds, starting to split their spirit. Seeing that Yuzi had single-handedly suppressed the 10 guardian emperors and that the extraordinary sun was at a complete disadvantage, Shirako stood in front of the immortal child and Seiko Kaitian, who were about to make a move. Dressed in a white robe, Shirako's body was burning with a faint white flame. His eyes were indifferent, as if God was observing an ant. As his gaze swept past, the immortal child felt as if the martial will in his body was going to leave his body, and he had a feeling that he was not under his control. At the same time, Shirako's voice sounded in their minds, "Don't move." The immortal child frowned and looked at Shirako, Heizi, Yuzi, and the other 3 hidden in the turbid flow. He thought worriedly, after 1,000 years, these 6 old demons' powers have been weakened to an extreme. However, after 1,000 years of seclusion, their realms have become increasingly unfathomable. However, the White Emperor Zenith Sword represents endless energy. Although one person can suppress them for a time, they won't be able to last for long. Just as the immortal child was thinking of this, the turbid flow moved once again. Fatso frowned. I didn't expect that the extraordinary sun still has some background. There's a limit to the curse of sin. If this goes on for too long, Heizi will still be defeated. Hauzi, go and help him. As Fatso said this, a strong man whose upper body was bare and lower body was covered in a large area of scales walked out. The corners of his lips curled up into a savage smile. Are the 2 of you enough? With my heavenly secrets shifting art, it'll be enough to shield the heavenly secrets, preventing any experts below tier 7 of the divine level from sensing this place, Fatso said calmly. As for the imperial capital below, Tuanzi will be in charge of defending it. He'll be able to fend off any repercussions from the battle and prevent these sacrifices from dying. Simultaneously, the entire imperial capital was protected by Tuanzi's powers, and a layer of gentle light barrier encompassed the sky above the imperial capital. Houzi laughed. Then I'll be going. At the next moment, his body leaped abruptly like a violent dragon dashing out. Wherever he passed by, his strong body seemed to tear through void space, creating many spatial cracks. Just by running at full power, he had achieved the result of the clash between the extraordinary sun and Fang Xinjian's fists and fingers earlier. A hissing sound rang out, and the extraordinary sun did not care about the turbid flow's protection at all. He darted out from it and then turned into a bolt of lightning, darting across void space. He reached out his palm and grabbed out toward Extraordinary Sun's neck. Sensing the enemy's arrival, Extraordinary Sun, who was using the White Emperor Zenith sword and the Curse of Sin to deplete each other's energies, frowned and tapped out in Houzi's direction. The White Emperor Zenith sword's light ring trembled, and countless light spots gathered on Extraordinary Sun's fingertip. At the next moment they turned into a crystalline substance, forming a crystal-like light cannon that shot out toward Houzi. It was clearly another move from the 24 doctrines of divine retribution, void space calamity. This move used the power of spatial translocation to shift the powers in the opponent's body, causing the other party's powers to lose balance and self-destruct. The greater the disparity between the two parties' powers, the stronger the prowess of this move would be. Extraordinary Sun wanted to rely on his White Emperor Zenith sword to propel the void space calamity, causing Houzi to explode. However, just as the void space calamity's light cannon struck Houzi's body and engulfed Houzi's body completely, a black shadow appeared within the void space light cannon, going against the flow. The light cannon, which could crush a Tier 5 divine level expert and crazily deplete the powers of a Tier 6 divine level expert, struck onto Houzi's body. However, it was unable to leave behind any marks at all. Streams of spatial translocation power kept on exploding in his body, but they were unable to change even his physical structure in the slightest, let alone trigger the powers to self-destruct. Houzi dashed out, smashing through Extraordinary Sun's void space light cannon and scattering it. What came charging toward him was the great radiant sword, which was formed from a myriad of sword light. Houzi plunged into the sea of swords that filled up the entire sky. There were countless sword lights sweeping onto his body every second, but the sword lights that could bathe the entire land in blood were unable to leave any marks on his body. Right now, his entire body seemed to have turned into a piece of glass, and the glow emitted from the surface of his body seemed to contain the most beautiful rhythm in the world. With a loud rumble, Houzi broke through the sea of swords. Under Extraordinary Sun's astonished gaze, Houzi appeared before him. He grabbed out with one hand, violently grabbing onto the Extraordinary Sun's neck. Then he continued dashing out, smashing fiercely into the 6 streams of turbid flow that had gathered behind the Extraordinary Sun. Just as Houzi grabbed onto the Extraordinary Sun, 10 light spheres swelled up and appeared behind the Extraordinary Sun. One after another, they smashed out toward Houzi's body like small suns. Amidst the world-shaking explosions, countless microscopic black holes were born, crazily engulfing and spewing out all matter in the world. 10 consecutive world creation irregularities. Chapter 997. The Extraordinary Sun erupted once again amidst the danger. He utilized all the powers that he could unleash at one go, and ether particles that seemed as if they were going to explode the entire world were unleashed at this moment. The 10 world creation irregularities that were like small suns burst out with white light that penetrated through the world, causing the entire world to be covered in white. Nothing could be seen clearly anymore. All of the explosive forces were condensed into a beam by the Extraordinary Sun through spatial translocation, and he pressed it gently onto Houzi's chest. A white light pillar soared into the sky, and Housy's body was completely encompassed within it. As the white light flow struck him, his figure became increasingly faint until it eventually disappeared. It was as if he had died completely. However, after the light pillar slowly dissipated, Housy's body was once again revealed. His body, which had been like a glaze, had become extremely dim, and even his entire left hand had turned into dust. Only his right hand was still grabbing onto the extraordinary sun's neck tightly. In the end, he fiercely pushed the extraordinary sun into the turbid flow. The extraordinary sun looked at Feng Xinjian's body in disbelief. He found it hard to imagine that his 10 consecutive attacks from the world creation irregularities had merely worn off Feng Xinjian's left hand. This meant that the toughness of Feng Xinjian's body far surpassed his imagination. Once Tier 6 divine-level experts unleash their powers, they would be able to traverse several hundred or even several thousand kilometers. The battlefield would be boundless, and it would be hard for either side to kill their opponent instantly. However, there were also people who took the opposite path, condensing all of their battle prowess into a small area, not leaving any way out for themselves. Housy was such a cultivator. The doomsday pass that he cultivated focused on condensing all of one's powers, forging one's conjured physique into an undying and indestructible treasured physique. This allowed one to survive the end of the universe. For this, he gave up on the ability to transform into a myriad of clones and forms. He also gave up on the path of condensing a virtual image. Even his regenerative ability became extremely slow. However, he also obtained a body that could adapt to any harsh natural environment. Every inch of his body structure was compressed from a boundless area of space, possessing a defensive prowess that could allow him to survive in the center of the sun. Even though the phenomenal saint went all out to counterattack, he only managed to blow off one of his hands. Seeing that the extraordinary sun was pushed into the 6 turbid streams, the surrounding turbid streams immediately surged forward, turning into a black sea that enveloped the extraordinary sun. Housy laughed heartily, and in the next moment, he'd already transformed into a wisp of shadow and darted into it. The ferocious tides kept on surging up and down. Clearly, the battle inside was extremely dangerous. However, the light that represented the extraordinary sun was also getting increasingly weaker. Clearly, he was being suppressed by the 2 Tier 6 divine-level old demons. In the Imperial capital, the series of changes on the battlefield had left everyone dumbfounded. If it could be said that the phenomenal saint's domineering appearance in the beginning and suppressing the 4 extremes had already astonished everyone, then the appearance of the plenary foundation septet surpassed everyone's imagination. Tyron's brows were almost knitted tightly together as he stared at the 6 turbid streams in the sky. He sighed and said, "Who on earth are these people? To think that the extraordinary sun is in possession of the White Emperor Zenith Sword and has reached Tier 6 of the divine level. To think that he's being suppressed." Prince Philip said coldly, "The situation isn't good." The people from the Myriad Stars Mountain were also panicking. Countless people looked at the occasional explosions of wills in the sky and sensed the soul-stirring powers. If a little bit of it were to leak out, it would be enough to turn them into ashes. In fact, if the extraordinary sun and the Quanji 7 were to unleash their powers without any restraints, they would be able to destroy the entire world's ecosystem. It was just that the extraordinary sun was able to control the range and method of his energy output, and the Quanji 7 were unwilling to attract the attention of other experts who might exist. They used the 6 turbid streams to fend off and conceal most of the repercussive waves from the attack. As for the entire imperial capital, it was encompassed by Tuanzi's powers. Countless knights, conferred knights, and divine-level experts' envoys tried to escape, but they were unable to do so. However, just as countless people were panicking, Maria looked at the battlefield in the sky with a perplexed expression. A hint of palpitation flashed in her eyes. Right now, the various things that were happening on the battlefield gave her an extremely familiar feeling. As the battle got more and more intense, this feeling also got increasingly stronger. In the battlefield, the immortal child also started to feel a little anxious. It was because after the extraordinary sun entered the 6 turbid streams, his commotion became increasingly weaker. It was as if he was gradually being suppressed completely. Seiko Kaitian, this can't go on. If the White Emperor Zenith Sword is really taken away by the other party, we'll be in a passive position. After the Immortality Saint communicated with the Ocean Sky Saint through his martial will, the Ocean Sky Saint's gaze also turned grim. The Ocean Sky Saint lifted his head and looked toward the sky. It seems that this is really the limit. It was meant to ambush the other Mage Kings. But by the looks of it, they really aren't here. At the next moment, a myriad of space-time tunnels opened up abruptly in the sky. Streams of purple flames burned crazily, and as the flames spread out, it was as if many holes had been burned out in space, forming countless space-time tunnels. As the space-time tunnels opened up, countless pieces of information from other universes gushed out. The immortal child said in surprise, "This is black magic?" The several thousand space-time tunnels were the black magic that the Purple Mage King had performed. As the space-time tunnels opened up, the army of bugs that she had nurtured in several worlds gushed out like tidal wave. Many huge dragon-like purple bugs darted out from the tunnels. They moved about in the sky, occasionally darting through void space and swimming toward the turbid streams. There were also many wild beasts that looked like cockroaches flapping their wings, spewing out streams of plasma flames as they flew around. There were also existences that looked like half-bugs and half-humans that shot out. With a single thought, they sent out their martial will. If one were to pass through the space-time tunnels, they would be able to see that the entire planet on the other end of the tunnel had turned into a bug nest. Regardless of whether it was in the sky, on the ground, or underground, there were all sorts of bugs that kept on wriggling out from the ground and darting toward the space-time tunnels. The number of bugs on the entire planet was uncountable. Moreover, this was just one of the bug nests that the Purple Mage King had left behind. The Purple Mage King might only be at Tier 5 of the Divine level, but her strongest ability had never been one-on-one battles. Right now, the army of bugs that she was displaying was the battle means that she specialized in. This endless sea of bugs that could fill up the entire world was something that even a Tier 6 Divine-level expert would not be able to wipe out in one go. Moreover, the bug nests were still incessantly depleting the planet's resources, giving birth to even more bugs. Chapter 998. If they were to continue being depleted like this, even a Tier 6 Divine-level expert might be depleted of their powers. However, the appearance of the bug swarm did not allow Seiko Kaitian to relax at all. If it was said that the Quanji 7 had not been clear about their opponent's abilities when they had first appeared, then after a series of exchanges, the abilities they displayed could be said to be astonishing. Even with the Purple Mage King's bug swarm working together, Seiko Kaitian still did not have the slightest confidence. With the appearance of the bug swarm, the fat priest, who had not made a move all this while, finally made his move. Fang Xinjian took a step forward, and while being wrapped up by the 6 streams of turbid flow, he arrived before the swarm of bugs. Then, he stretched out his hand and grabbed out. It was as if he had grabbed hold of the entire space in the world. Then, with a violent tug, it was as if the entire space in the world was being pulled out. What happened next was an astonishing scene. With Fatso's tug, the space where the bug swarm was seen to have become chaotic. Not only was the location of the space messed up, but even the sequence of their movements seemed to have changed. It was as if all of their movements and directions had been edited by someone, intersecting and opposing each other. At the next moment, the bug swarm's attacks all landed on their own people, turning into dregs that plunged down to the ground. 5 seconds. I can only attack for 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, the heavenly secret's shifting art will be broken, and the others will be able to sense this place. As Fatso's martial will was transmitted out, the turbid flow that encompassed the extraordinary sun also started to tremble intensely. It was as if the battle within had reached the most critical juncture. After Fatso fended off the bug swarm with a single attack, he moved at the next moment and appeared before the extraordinary sun and Seiko Kaitian. "The two of you better not move around recklessly," Fatso said calmly. "This way you'll be able to live a little longer." However, how could the extraordinary sun and Seiko Kaitian possibly listen to him? With a single thought, they each performed their divine arts and struck out toward Fatso. However, as soon as the power of the divine spell appeared, it was drawn out by an inexplicable force of attraction, and then it exploded. To think that even the power of the God of universal truth would directly backfire on them. This was something that the two of them had never imagined before. Seiko Kaitian was seriously injured by the explosion. The immortality saint trembled, and his countenance also turned pale. "Oh!" The fatty threw a surprised glance at the immortality saint, as if he had not expected that the immortality saint would be able to fend off this attack of his. However, the fatty still did not think much of it and put out his palm once again, slapping out toward the immortality saint. The immortal child's brows twitched, and he felt a strong sense of danger. He did not wish to take on this attack head-on. Just as he was about to move away at the speed of light, he realized that no matter how he moved, he could not escape from Fatso's palm. Then, he tried to activate the space diversion ability, but it also failed. Excellent. To think that the Church is still hiding a Tier 6 divine level expert. Just as the immortal child activated the space diversion ability, Fatso sensed something different about him. A gleam flashed in his eyes, and his palm struck out at an accelerated speed. Faced with Fatso's attack, the immortal child was unable to dodge and could only strike out a palm as well. However, when their palms collided, he discovered that all of his power was rebounded, and the same power exploded in his body. It was as if he had punched himself at full power, causing him to be pushed back repeatedly. The light spots all over his body kept on shattering. How is this possible? To be able to cause the God of universal truth's powers to suffer a backlash, causing my space diversion to fail, and even rebounding my attack. The immortal child looked at the fat priest in astonishment and doubt. The fat priest's realm far surpassed his, and it even surpassed that of Heizi and Hauzi, who had just exchanged blows with the extraordinary sun. The means that the fat priest displayed were unfathomable. Simultaneously, just as Fatso was dealing the immortal child and Seiko Kaitian serious injuries, the turbid flow that encompassed the extraordinary sun seethed, finally revealing the figures of Hauzi, Heizi, and the extraordinary sun. The extraordinary sun was being held up by Hauzi like a little chick, and the two light circles from the white Emperor Zenith sword behind him had disappeared. There were 14 streams of light flashing to and fro in Heizi's hands. They were clearly the white Emperor Zenith sword. At the sight of this scene, the countenances of the immortal child, Seiko Kaitian, and the other guardian kings, as well as everyone else in the imperial capital, changed drastically. Earlier on, Fatso and the others had already displayed the realm of Tier 6 of the divine level. One of them could even go up against the extraordinary sun. Then, if the white Emperor Zenith sword were to appear in their hands, how strong would they be? Fatso laughed out loud and appeared next to Heizi. He threw an admiring glance toward the white Emperor Zenith sword in Heizi's hand. What a great divine weapon! To think that we'd have the chance to get our hands on this divine weapon after 1,000 years. The other 5 also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The extraordinary sun had been captured, the 10 guardian kings had been suppressed, and the remaining 2 saints had been seriously injured by Fatso. With the white Emperor Zenith sword in their hands, there was no longer anyone who could stop them. When everyone in the imperial capital saw this scene, they were even more astonished. This was especially so for people like the Sea Monarch. He had thought that he was quite strong, but after coming to the imperial capital, he realized that the empire's power had swelled up and that Fang Xinjian had many experts under him. Thereafter, the holy sea of truth descended, and the extraordinary sun killed Fang Xinjian and the other three consecutively. This made everyone realize how terrifying this massive existence that dominated the land was. However, just as everyone thought that the holy sea of truth was going to dominate the entire land, another 6 mysterious experts appeared and defeated the extraordinary sun. The fat priest, who was the leader, dealt the 2 saints serious injuries with just a few words. They even snatched the church's strongest divine equipment, the white Emperor Zenith sword. Heizi looked at the 14 light spots in his hand, and the corners of his lips curled up into a brutal smile. He lifted his head and looked toward the immortal child and Seiko Kaitian, who were in the sky. If I remember correctly, the white Emperor Zenith sword has a total of 28 nodes. The remaining ones should be on your side, right? The immortal child and Seiko Kaitian were stunned for a moment. Then they sensed the gazes of the 6 demons that harbored evil intentions, and they tensed up. The 6 evil intents assaulted them with unparalleled pressure, causing the immortal child and Seiko Kaitian to feel as if the surrounding space had materialized and was pressing down on their bodies, as if they were going to imprison them. Damn it, Fang Xinjian Erbian, where on earth have you guys gone? The immortal child was feeling extremely exasperated. If Fang Xinjian and Erbian had appeared earlier, they would have been able to make a move while the extraordinary sun was holding the 2 of them back. That would have been the best opportunity. However, not only had the extraordinary sun been captured, but the remaining 6 demons had also maintained their battle prowess. They had even obtained the white Emperor Zenith sword, which had 14 nodes. The situation seemed to have reached an extreme crisis. Just then, everyone seemed to see a stream of sword light flashing in the air. Everyone felt that they had seen this stream of sword light, but they were unable to tell where it had swept past. It was as if the entire world had been swept by this stream of sword light. Or rather, it could be said that this stream of sword light had swept past their eyeballs. Who is it? Fatso's brows twitched and he put out his hand to block. A wave of martial will collided before Heizi. The 2 gushes of power collided, causing countless cracks to appear in the space. The black cracks spread out across the entire sky above the imperial capital and even continued to spread out in layers, just like shock wave. After this attack, Heizi was also swept out by the repercussions of the collision. He kept on rolling uncontrollably and only came to a stop after flying out for over 10 kilometers. A large part of Fatso's palm was also instantly shattered. His body trembled slightly as he looked at the person who had suddenly appeared before him with a grim countenance. The person who had appeared before them wore a black robe that was casually draped over his body like clouds, revealing his slightly muscular chest. His face was as fair as snow, and he had a faint smile on the corners of his lips, exuding a fatal attraction. It was as if he was the most precious gem in the world. Right now, after having cultivated with Erbian for 3 months, Fang Xinjian was exuding an unrivaled and independent disposition. He was like an immortal who would leave at any moment, giving off an untouchable feeling. This feeling made the Quanji 7 people feel a little strange. Heizi's gaze was grim, and there seemed to be a hint of disbelief on his face as he said, Fang Xinjian? Fang Xinjian's gaze swept past the Quanji 7 people and then landed on the stunned Heizi. Leave the white Emperor Zenith sword behind. You guys can leave. Hearing Fang Xinjian's words, the Quanji 7 people were stunned for a moment before they burst out laughing at the next moment. Ha ha! Ha 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 ha! Ha 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 ha! Fatso also laughed. As he laughed, the fats on his body seemed to be trembling, and he laughed louder and louder. Are you an idiot? He dashed up to Fang Xinjian, his face almost touching Fang Xinjian's. He stared into Fang Xinjian's eyes and said, "If you guys hand over the remaining White Emperor Zenith sword, I can consider leaving your corpses intact." However, at the next moment, a hint of astonishment flashed on his face. Concurrently, a black sword lotus bloomed on Fatso's face, turning the upper half of his life into light spots. "If you don't leave, you'll die." Chapter 999. 2 months ago, in the Holy See of Truth's Institute of Holy Texts, Urbian's figure slowly floated in midair. His hands kept on disappearing and reappearing as if he had entered deep into an unknown world. Fang Xinjian sat before him, looked at his actions, and said calmly, "The appearance of flames completely changed the history of mankind, as well as the way humans battle. From then on, the development of mankind was a history of war from beginning to end. Bronze weapons, armored horses, steam engines, internal combustion engines. Each time there was a revolution in science and technology, it would lead to a drastic change in warfare. Firearms almost completely eliminated cold weapons, tanks could easily massacre infantrymen, fighter aircrafts changed the way battles were fought, and the appearance of guided missiles expanded the battlefield to encompass the entire planet. It's the same in Miracle World. Light speed movement, cloning into thoughts, sudden inspiration, spatial translocation. Each time there was an advancement in technology, it would lead to a revolution in the way battles were fought, and those who were left behind were almost unable to retaliate at all." Urbian continued, "It's the same for Tier 6 divine-level experts, spatial translocation. Experts who have grasped spatial translocation have an absolute advantage in battle, while opponents who haven't grasped spatial translocation will be unable to retaliate at all. If one wishes to surpass them, they'll need to completely change the rules of battle, using an unprecedented technology to dominate the battle. It's just like light speed movement, sudden inspiration, and spatial translocation." As he spoke, Urbian's arms disappeared completely. Even his body started to enter a state where it seemed like it would gradually disappear. "During this 1 month, we've gathered all the great arts from the various sects and factions in the world, as well as all the knowledge we've grasped, as well as a portion of the profoundness of the 13 demonic gods' powers. We've gathered almost all the power systems in this world, and we've finally achieved something." As he spoke, Urbian's body suddenly disappeared completely. Fang Xinjian's gaze flickered, and his martial will rose up, sweeping out in all directions like waves. However, even when he probed to the ends of spacetime, he was still unable to discover any trace of Urbian's existence. However, Fang Xinjian did not seem to have any doubts about this. He just sat there, and there seemed to be countless thoughts flashing through his eyes. He did not move at all, and no one knew what he was thinking. 3 days later, the immortal child appeared before Fang Xinjian. With a point of his finger, a beam of light drilled into Fang Xinjian's mind. "This is the information you asked me to find. It's a summary of all the information about space and time collected by the Holy See of Truth. There are even notes written by several popes." The immortal child said, "But what do you want them for?" Every cultivator felt different, saw different things, and had a different understanding of heaven and earth. In fact, what these people saw was only a part of the truth. If you read them now, they might not help you. Instead, they might become a hindrance. As he spoke, the immortal child looked around and asked, "By the way, where is Urbian? My White Emperor Zenith sword is still with him." Fang Xinjian said lightly, "He's right here." "He's right here?" The immortal child sent out his martial will, but he could not find any traces of Urbian. He sighed helplessly and continued to ask, "Then how are the results? We've discovered some new paths, but we have different understandings of them." He's currently roaming in the gaps between space-time in search of the essence of his existence. Fang Xinjian paused for a moment before saying, "And I'm thinking of ways to reobserve this world and see the truth of this world." "Can you speak like a human?" The immortal child shrugged. Forget it, I'm leaving. You guys can do whatever you want. 10 days ago, the immortal child had completely given up on cultivating together with Fang Xinjian, Erbian, and the others. Although they had shared all their knowledge and secret manuals, their rate of improvement made the immortal child feel inferior. He did not know when it had started, but he could no longer understand what Erbian was saying. As for Fang Xinjian, he had no idea what he was cultivating either. Therefore, he decided to back out and cultivate the knowledge he had obtained by himself. Watching as the immortal child left, Fang Xinjian closed his eyes. The entire world seemed to have sunk into darkness. What the eyes see isn't reality. What the ears hear isn't reality. Even what one's martial will senses isn't reality either. What is reality? Everything we see is nothing more than the photons our eyes receive reflected from the outside world. After the photons pass through a series of changes in energy and momentum on the retina. Based on these changes, the brain forms a so-called image. What is the truth of the world? Momentum and energy are the essence of this world. Our 5 senses, our emotions, and even our consciousness are just countless changes in momentum and energy. And the source of their changes. Fang Xinjian lifted his head and looked toward the sky above his head. His eyes were filled with indifference, as if he could see through countless void spaces and see the ends of the universe. He lifted his finger gently, and a large tree in the distance suddenly shattered without any warning, turning into ashes. Just as the Quanji 7 people were sweeping through the imperial capital and slowly gaining the upper hand, Fang Xinjian was still sitting in the small courtyard he had been in 2 months ago. After 3 months of hard work, I've finally improved. Fang Xinjian looked at the small courtyard in front of him and said as if he was talking to himself. I've cut off the source, jumped out of the picture, and reached the essence. Erbian's voice rang out in his mind. Brother Fang, your sword arts have reached the peak of perfection. Fang Xinjian replied. This is also the result of our exchanges. However, it's only my sword that has achieved this. It's not me who has achieved this. Despite this, I've already surpassed all the famous sword artists in this world since ancient times, Fang Xinjian said calmly. The vastness of the universe surpasses everyone's imagination. Beyond space-time, it's still space-time. What we can observe now is merely a portion of the truth. To be able to observe more of the truth through a portion of the truth means that we're already on the path toward the truth. Just then, Fang Xinjian frowned slightly. Regarding the matter in the imperial capital, I'll make a trip there. With that, he stood up. It's a pity that I'm still 1 step away. I'm still not at full strength. It's fine. This world still has the 7th, 8th, and 9th tier of the divine level. They'll give us sufficient opportunities. Then I'll be right back. At this moment, the black sword lotus exploded on Fatso's head, gradually crushing his entire upper body. Faced with this attack that ignored the turbid flows and his heavenly secrets' shifting art, a hint of panic flashed in Fatso's will. Simultaneously, the other 5 people let out explosive bellows and attacked Fang Xinjian at the same time. Under Fang Xinjian's gaze, all the images, light waves, and sound waves disappeared one after another. In his eyes, there were only changes to energy and momentum left. His will seemed to have leaped to an extremely high place, looking down on the entire world. Chapter 1000. The truth that humans sensed would forever only be a part of the truth. It was just like how the shadow cast on a wall would always change according to the angle. The shape observed through the shadow would forever only be a part of the actual body. However, if one were to directly observe the projected body, they would naturally be able to see all of its forms. This was what it meant when living creatures observed the real world from a higher dimensional perspective. They would also be able to see more of the truth. Right now, the virtual image that Fang Xinjian was condensing had raised his sword realm into the higher dimensional world, allowing him to view the real world like how ordinary people would view a picture scroll. It was also like pressing down on a picture scroll with one's finger, thinking of ways to get the sword realm from the higher dimensional world to attack the real world. Everything in the picture scroll could be pressed down casually with one's finger, and the life forms in the picture scroll would not be able to sense anything until they were crushed to death. It was the same in the real world. They would not be able to sense such an attack until the high-dimensional attack hit them. Any matter or defense in the real world would be meaningless before such an attack. Faced with such an attack, all other forms of energy would be useless. One could only use one's martial will to take it head-on. The entire world was almost completely blank regarding martial arts in the higher dimensions. This was also the prototype that Fang Xinjian and Erbian had created after 3 months of tough cultivation. In the world, Tier 9 Divine level night martial arts would require one to grasp the direction of time after spatial translocation. However, both Erbian and Fang Xinjian understood that if they were to continue down this path, they would forever be left behind by the pioneers. It was only by opening up a new path, like how tanks had appeared out of nowhere or how nuclear missiles had changed history. Only then would they be able to use brand new technology to completely change the way of battle, crushing the original way of battle. After 3 months of tough cultivation, they had finally taken a path that was different from Tier 9 of the Divine level. Although it was just the beginning, there was already a qualitative change. Right now, Fang Xinjian could already integrate the Sword Realm's attacks from the higher dimensional world into his punches and kicks, engaging in battle with high-dimensional attack. This meant that each time he attacked, there would be the Sword Realm, which was outside the picture scroll, pressing down on the target in the picture scroll. When Fatso was injured, Haozi was the first among the Quanji 7 people to make a move. With a sway of his body, he squeezed through all the space in front of him. Like a black bolt of lightning streaking across the sky, he charged at Fang Xinjian and threw a punch. His fist seemed to be condensed from the vast space that was as vast as the oceans and mountains. When he punched out, it was as if the entire continental shelf had collided, as if it was going to completely tear the space in front of him apart. However, in the face of Haozi's punch, Fang Xinjian merely flicked out a finger, and under everyone's astonished gazes, Haozi's fist was cut open like butter. All the defenses, all the energy, all the space, in front of his sword, nothing could withstand it. After slashing off Haozi's arm with a single sword attack, Fang Xinjian took a step forward and once again appeared before Fatso. Fatso's countenance changed drastically, and with a slight tremble, he turned into countless light shadows and dissipated in all directions. Just then, Haizi and Yuzi, one on the left and one on the right, brought about a myriad of turbid currents and surrounded Fang Xinjian like tsunamis. "How can we possibly let you injure our companion so easily?" Haizi smiled coldly and struck out with a punch. It was the Black Sovereign Knight Emperor Fist. The night scene in the sky seemed to descend along with this punch, encompassing toward Fang Xinjian. Yuzi let out a soft sound wave, and there seemed to be a myriad of demons appearing in void space. Countless humans from Fang Xinjian's memories appeared in his vision, and even the martial will in Fang Xinjian's body started to tremble slightly as if he was going to enter a state of qi deviation. The two of them attacked with killing moves right from the start, not holding back at all. Although I don't know why Fang Xinjian has the strength of a Tier 6 Divine level expert, with the two of us joining forces, no matter how strong Fang Xinjian is, it's impossible for him to. However, at the next moment, Fang Xinjian formed a sword with his fingers, and sword light attacked out toward the two of them like starlight. He did not stop and continued to chase after Fatso. What kind of joke is this? You want to fend off our attacks and chase after Fatso like this? How can we possibly let you? However, under Haizi's disbelieving gaze, sword light suddenly tore through the night sky, and a myriad of mental demons were wiped out. Both Yuzi and he let out a stifled snort and came to a stop. At the moment when they were forced back by Fang Xinjian's sword attack, Fang Xinjian had already arrived in a stretch of void space and slashed out. Kacha kacha shattering sounds rang out, and Fatso's figure was revealed. The martial will throughout his body shattered once again. I've performed the heavenly secrets shifting art to block off the sudden inspiration senses. How did you manage to find me? Fang Xinjian did not reply. He tapped out a finger toward Fatso's body once again. Just then, layers of stacking spatial barriers encompassed his body. The layers of barriers were like countless pieces of glass, causing his figure to appear blurry. It was Tuanzi, one of the Quanji 7, who had made his move. With this move, he condensed the space into many metal plates, wanting to trap Fang Xinjian. However, at the next moment, his countenance changed abruptly. He felt that the spatial barriers trapping Fang Xinjian seemed to have turned into tofu. No matter how his martial will operated, he was unable to stop the many spatial barriers from collapsing rapidly. In the blink of an eye, Fang Xinjian's palm pierced through the final barrier, and the entire barrier turned into dust. Tuanzi felt that all the spatial barriers were like glass before Fang Xinjian. He was in great disbelief. How could there be such a thing? Then with a flash, Fang Xinjian once again appeared before Fatso and tapped out a finger. How can we possibly let him kill Fatso before us? Haizi, Yuzi, Tuanzi, and Haozi all let out a furious bellow, and the four of them made their moves at the same time. Black viscous substances flowed down along the turbid currents, wrapping up Fang Xinjian's body. Wherever they passed by, all the ether particles lost their effects. However, under the sweep of Fang Xinjian's sword fingers, Haizi's curse of sin was instantly slashed into dust. Yuzi's brows furrowed, and the mental demons on the 10 guardian kings all disappeared. Then his fingers continued to play, as if using void space as the strings of a zither. An indescribable heavenly demonic sound rang out in everyone's minds. Fang Xinjian's body trembled slightly, and streams of black qi rose from him. However, with just a tremble of his body, the overwhelming black qi was completely shattered, no longer able to stop his body in the slightest. Just as the mental demons attacked, Haozi once again dashed up to Fang Xinjian. One of his hands had been shattered, while the other had been slashed off. However, right now, his right leg was raised up high, and it was like a battle axe that could split the world apart, pressing down fiercely toward Fang Xinjian. Wherever his right leg passed by, everything would return to chaos, and a stretch of absolute darkness extended out toward Fang Xinjian. It was a power that was equivalent to the entire world crashing down. However, faced with this attack, Fang Xinjian flicked his finger slightly, and there seemed to be a flash of sword light amidst the absolute darkness. The sword light flashed past Haozi's right leg, connecting together. At the next moment, his entire right leg turned into a myriad of light spots, disappearing without a trace. Fang Xinjian's sword fingers did not stop there. They were like the sharpest sword in the world, piercing through the over 1,000 layers of spatial barriers that Tuanzi had set up during this period of time. Fang Xinjian disregarded the turbid flows and once again tapped fiercely onto Fatso's martial will. The myriad of martial wills were crushed into dust. On the ground, Tyrant looked at the intersecting battles in the sky in a daze and mumbled, They can't win against Xinjian." Just then, his consciousness trembled, and Haizi's enraged bellow rang out. His tone was filled with exasperation. "Fang Xinjian, you deserve to die." Rumble! A stream of light sword rose up from his hand. He had clearly activated the White Emperor Zenith sword, turning into a light pillar that connected the heavens and the earth, encompassing toward Fang Xinjian. However, faced with this White Emperor Zenith sword's attack, Fang Xinjian did not even turn his head. He casually threw a punch backward, and his fist collided with the light pillar. the light pillar bounced back and struck toward the sky, creating a hole with a radius of several 10,000 meters and reaching toward the nine-tiered heavens. Concurrently, Fang Xinjian flicked his sword fingers repeatedly, and streams of sword light once again locked onto Fatso. Right now, Fatso's consciousness was in a daze, as if he was unable to summon any power to resist. Many black sword lotuses bloomed in void space, absorbing and disintegrating all of Fatso's martial will. Ah! At the final moment, Fatso let out a shrill cry and unleashed the last of his potential explosively. The heavenly secret's shifting art was activated at full power, and he continued to move through space, escaping out of the land at superluminal speed. However, at the very last moment, he could only hear a single sentence ringing out in his mind. "Stay behind." Bang! The remaining 5 people from the Quanji 7 people watched in a daze as Fang Xinjian clenched his palm slightly. Fatso's last bit of martial will suddenly shattered and dissipated, and their countenances turned extremely grim. "If I say I'll kill you, I'll kill you. Even if you go all out to stop me, you can forget about saving him." When Fang Xinjian's gaze swept toward Heizi and the others, for the first time, anxiety appeared in the eyes of the Quanji 7 people. Chapter 1001. What sword technique did this Fang Xinjian use earlier on? Why are our moves and all sorts of spatial translocation techniques useless? Right now, Heizi was extremely wary of Fang Xinjian. The heavenly secret's shifting art that Fatso cultivated not only allowed him to reflect and move all sorts of attacks, but he could also mess up his opponent's space-time sense and block off the sudden inspiration senses. It was an unrivaled technique from the Western Land's heavenly secrets sect. Moreover, after being at Tier 6 of the divine level and having been in seclusion for 1,000 years, Fatso's cultivation had become increasingly deep and unfathomable. Each and every one of his actions could even affect a part of the world. He had even broken through the immortal child's spatial translocation ability and reflected their divine art. Right now, Fatso could be said to be the strongest amongst the 6 of them in terms of realm. However, a grandmaster like him had been beaten to death by Fang Xinjian despite the other 4's help. Houzi's figure slowly changed and shrank. His body was formed from the condensation of countless spaces. His conjured physique, which appeared to be only the size of a human, was actually the size of several continents that had been compressed together to form his conjured physique. Wanting to destroy his body would require a power that would be equivalent to wanting to crush several continents into dust. However, with this, his recovery speed would also be extremely slow. After losing a large amount of his body's tissues, he could only maintain the integrity of his conjured physique's structure by shrinking his body. His torso and legs started to shrink, and the limbs that he had lost grew out. In the blink of an eye, he took on the appearance of a 10-year-old child. Tuanzi and Yuzi were also filled with wariness. During the obstructions earlier, their moves could be said to have had the weakest effect on Fang Xinjian. The most terrifying thing is still the sudden inspiration senses. I clearly didn't sense any danger from each of his moves, but under such circumstances, his seemingly ordinary moves managed to break through our attacks. Heizi was still recalling the scene from earlier. On the other side, Shirako, who hadn't made a move since the beginning, finally made his move. His move was like the movement of the stars and the rotation of the sun and moon. In an instant, he transformed into a gigantic white dragon that was tens of thousands of meters long. Every time the white dragon moved, it seemed like it was going to burst the entire space. He gave people the feeling that he was going to break through the shackles of the world at any time, and the whole world was like a cage to him. This ability to transform into a white dragon was the white dragon quintessence that Shirako had been cultivating for countless days and nights. The white dragon that he had transformed into was a mythical creature of the Western Land. It possessed the powerful ability to traverse space, devour mountains and rivers, and capture all living things. However, at the instant he transformed, a beam of sword light shone from Fang Xinjian's fingertip, and the entire white dragon was instantly dismembered into dragon blood, dragon flesh, and dragon scales. Shirako also came back to his senses at this moment. There was no white dragon, no sword light, only fear in his eyes. The power that was surging in his body had not truly erupted. Invulnerable, Shirako's expression was so gloomy that it seemed like it was going to drip water. Ever since Fang Xinjian had appeared, he had been observing him with his last tribulation eye, looking for the opportunity to make a move. The last tribulation eye could see through a hint of luck in the unseen world. It could detect misfortune and predict success or failure. It allowed him to either not make a move or succeed the moment he made a move. However, ever since he used his Dharma eye to observe Fang Xinjian, he couldn't find any opportunity to make a move. Every time he saw the scene in the last tribulation eye, he would be defeated and killed. This was the reason why he hadn't made a move all this while. A series of thoughts flashed through the minds of the remaining Quanji 7 at lightning speed. In the real world, it took less than 10 seconds. However, within these few seconds, Fang Xinjian moved once again. Sword shadows connected together, slashing to and fro in the sky like streams of black lines. Haizi, Tuanzi, Yuzi, and Haozi unleashed their full powers at the same time. The sky very quickly turned into a state of chaos. Thunderbolts, flames, and distorted space seethed everywhere. Streams of martial will waves seethed to and fro, as if wanting to kill all life in the space. Be careful! He's coming over. Don't let him target just one person. The 6 streams of turbid flow are useless. 4 black lines instantly cut across Haozi's body, and his legs and hands turned into dust in 0.001 seconds. The vast space and astonishing mass seemed to have lost all meaning before Fang Xinjian's sword move. Bang! Fang Xinjian's final foot stomped on Haozi's face, and he exploded on the spot like fireworks, turning into light spots that filled up the sky and dissipating into the air. Yuzi let out an astonished cry, and sound waves that could no longer be heard by the naked eye came ringing out from his body. However, wherever the sound waves passed by, all physical structures would shatter, and all the space started to seethe, wanting to turn the world into a purgatory. With a soft pft sound, a stream of black sword shadows descended from the sky, gushing into his fish head and instantly turning it into dust. This can't do. This can't go on. As Haizi looked at the scene before him, his gaze became increasingly panicked. This guy's sword intent is wearing down our martial will. Why is this happening? When divine-level experts fought, even Tier 6 divine-level experts, they would still use a portion of their martial will's power to stir up all sorts of energies in the world that were several tens or hundreds of times stronger. When they attacked each other, they would usually deplete the energies in the world first. Wherever Fang Xinjian's sword intent passed by, it would not collide with the various sound waves, thunderbolts, high temperatures, or spatial distortions that they had created. Instead, it would slash through their martial will. After being worn down for the past 1,000 years, the martial will of the Quanji 7 people had been continuously turned into their lifespans to help them survive. It had become extremely weak. Even though they had been going around plundering resources to replenish their martial will over the past 3 months, how could they possibly be a match for Fang Xinjian's martial will, which was at 8,500 points? This was why Fang Xinjian was able to single-handedly kill them with a single sword attack, causing them to continuously retreat in defeat. However, Tuanzi could no longer tolerate such an absolute disadvantage. With a furious bellow, he turned into a stream of light and descended toward the imperial capital. Kill all of his subordinates. In that instant, the layers of spatial barriers in the sky above the imperial capital that had been encompassed by him disappeared. Earlier on, they had wanted to use the countless experts in the imperial capital to carry out a blood sacrifice in order to rescue the leader of the Quanji 7 people, the prince. However, right now they were completely suppressed by Fang Xinjian and were at a disadvantage. Seeing that they were going to die in Fang Xinjian's hands one by one, how could they possibly care about the blood sacrifice? Chapter 1002. At the instant Tuanzi landed in the imperial capital, a ball of light rose up from his palm. Simultaneously, 10,000 meters up in the sky, the space with a radius of over 10,000 meters was instantly moved. All the air within it was compressed to the size of a thumb and then moved into Tuanzi's palm. An astonishing white light burst out from his palm. As long as the spatial barrier of the ball of light in his palm was removed, the explosive shock waves that would erupt from it would be sufficient to instantly flatten the entire imperial capital and kill everyone inside. It was precisely such a dangerous substance that Tuanzi held in his hand and pressed forward. He instantly darted through void space and appeared before the fourth prince, Tyrant, Prince Philip, and the others. The white ball of light suddenly appeared and instantly swelled up. The extremely viscous air extended out bit by bit. At the next moment, it would turn into strong gales and shock waves that could destroy everything in the world. However, time seemed to have come to a standstill. A white finger reached out from above the ball of light, tapping it lightly on the ball of light like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. Like a candle being blown out, the air explosion was extinguished and turned into nothingness. At this moment, Fang Xinjian also revealed himself. He grabbed Tuanzi's head and squeezed it slightly, causing it to explode, turning into a myriad of light spots. The myriad of martial will let out a series of bellows. Under Tuanzi's explosive power, layers of stacking spatial barriers covered Fang Xinjian's body. Then they shrank abruptly, gushing out toward the microscopic world. Molecules, atoms, electrons, photons. The scene before Fang Xinjian changed rapidly. It was a bizarre and dazzling microscopic world. All of time and space seemed to have lost all meaning in this instant. It was as if he was about to be sent to the ends of time and space, out of this universe. Tuanzi looked at the spot that had shrunk to the point where he could no longer sense it. Then he suddenly laughed out loud. He's dead. He's finally dead. Bang! The black shadow of the sword tore through the void. Unknowingly, it had created a series of ripples in the air as it stabbed into Tuanzi's back. Without sensing any danger or killing intent, Tuanzi's body exploded once again under this sword attack, turning into martial will that filled up the sky. Fang Xinjian flipped his palm and drew a circle around his palm. It was as if a black hole that possessed endless suction force had been created. In that instant, the martial will that filled up the sky was engulfed and then crushed into dust. In just a few seconds, Tuanzi, Yuzi, and Haozi were killed one after another, shocking everyone present and rendering them speechless. Shirako stared at Fang Xinjian, who was in the middle of the battlefield. His head and back seemed to be drenched in cold sweat. He was still unable to find any opportunity to make a move. In fact, amongst the Quanji 7 people, only his last tribulation I was able to sense the prowess of Fang Xinjian's attacks as it involved a hint of the profoundness of the timeline. It allowed him to sense a hint of the future. However, it was also because of this that he was unable to make a move until now. Simultaneously, in the space-time passageway that the bug army had passed through, on another planet in another world that was extremely far away from Miracle World, the Purple Mage King looked at the visual signal that a certain flying insect had sent over. She gulped and said, "What on earth is going on with this Fang Xinjian? Isn't his strength a little too illogical? How many years has he been cultivating? Compared to him, we've all been cultivating like dogs." The Chaos Witch's brows were all furrowed into a deep frown. I didn't expect this either. Back then, I thought that it was an idle move that the previous pope had casually made. To think that things would end up like this today. Miracle World's timeline has been completely messed up. From this moment onward, the future is no longer within my grasp. You mean the previous pope? The Purple Mage King was taken aback. He's not an Earthling? Of course not, the Chaos Witch said. That old man managed to deceive all of us. This Feng Xinjian must have come from the other side of the door. Heisey looked at the scene before him somewhat bitterly and said with great difficulty, "If I were to say that I'll leave the White Emperor Zenith's sword with you right now, would what you said earlier still stand?" Feng Xinjian shook his head and stepped on void space, walking toward Heisey. "It's better that I come and get it myself." Just as Feng Xinjian and the Quanji 7 people were engaged in a series of great battles, killing Heisey and the others, leaving them completely helpless and unable to retaliate. Everyone in the imperial capital was also astonished and in disbelief. On the stone platform belonging to the Myriad Stars Mountain, Maria was also looking in the direction of the sky in a daze. However, other than astonishment, there was even more perplexity in her gaze. After Fatso was killed, this hint of perplexity gradually dissipated, and hints of understanding flashed in her eyes. Just as Feng Xinjian's final sword slashed toward Heisey, Maria's figure flashed, and her hand slashed out horizontally, colliding fiercely with Feng Xinjian's arm. The collision of their arms was extremely ferocious, and the violent powers tugged at the space. With the point where the two of them collided as the center, a vortex that was like a black hole was created, sucking in all matter within a range of several thousand meters and stirring them up into pieces. After the collision, Feng Xinjian and Maria had each retreated over 10,000 meters away and were looking at each other from afar. A hint of astonishment flashed in Feng Xinjian's eyes. This could be said to be the first time that someone had been able to receive an attack from him head-on ever since he had appeared. Furthermore, this person was Maria, whom he had taught in the past. It was unknown when Maria's eyes had turned into a pure golden color, and the golden ponytail on her head had also been let down, turning into long golden hair that danced in the wind like golden flames. Her originally innocent and childish disposition had also undergone a world-changing change. She was now emitting waves of graceful and noble aura. Even her figure had changed. Her figure seemed to have become more curvaceous, and her entire body was filled with a sense of femininity. However, what surprised Feng Xinjian the most was the power that she had displayed. "Maria? No, who on earth are you?" Behind Maria, Heisey's figure trembled slightly. His eyes seemed to be tainted with a tinge of fear, panic, nervousness, and respect. "Your Highness, Prince. You've already broken free?" Hearing Heisey's greeting, Maria let out a coquettish laugh. Her breasts rose and fell, and she said coquettishly, "That's right, it really wasn't easy. If it weren't for the fact that so many of you died, I probably wouldn't have recovered my memories so quickly." Chapter 1003. Looking at the prince, Feng Xinjian also revealed a grim expression. He performed a high-dimensional attack with the sword realm that existed in the high-dimensional zone. He could ignore any usage of energy and attack the source of the other party's martial will directly. With this, he would be able to rely on his extremely high martial will of 8,500 points to crush the other party. Moreover, although Fatso, Heisey, and the others from the Quanji 7 had risen in cultivation realm over the past 1,000 years, their martial wills had been continuously converted into lifespans and had been weakened to an extremely low level. In fact, this was also the goal of Saint Adam and the others who had sealed them back then. They wanted to weaken their source through time and eventually deplete them to death. However, in the earlier exchange with the prince, Feng Xinjian did not manage to gain the slightest advantage despite having a martial will of 8,500 points. This meant that the other party's martial will was definitely not weaker than his. Moreover, this was the result after the other party had been weakened for 1,000 years. Then how powerful was the prince from 1,000 years ago? It was no wonder that Saint Adam, the formidable divine king, the Pope, and the Tulip dynasty that had unified the world had only managed to seal the other party after joining forces, relying on time to wear them down. This prince was probably the person who posed the greatest threat out of the Quanji Seven. The prince looked at Fang Xinjian with great interest. He licked his bright red lips and said, "I didn't expect that there would still be such an interesting man like you after 1,000 years. How about it? If you're willing to marry me and become my man, I can consider sparing your life." The prince's words were filled with a royal domineering air. It was as if everything in the world was going to be under his control. In fact, it was true that she was also very surprised by Fang Xinjian's strength. After all, although she was not as strong as she was 1,000 years ago, she had already recovered a portion of her strength. In fact, ever since she had been sealed 1,000 years ago, she had been searching for an opportunity to break free. Then, more than 10 years ago, the seal weakened a little, so she used the last 99% of her power to escape the seal using the reincarnation technique, becoming the so-called Maria. Over the next 10 years or so, she was worried that the Church of Universal Truth would discover her escape. Therefore, she allowed this physical body to grow, forming a fake personality on the surface and living there. Meanwhile, she hid in the deepest part of Maria's consciousness and fell into a deep sleep, slowly recovering her powers. However, it was only after the world's metamorphosis that the density of ether particles increased tremendously. It was only then that her recovery became extremely rapid. The other 6 members of the Quanji Seven people had the demonic seeds that she had left in their bodies, so their lives were in her hands. That was why they wanted to break the seal to save her, but they did not know that she had already escaped. However, it was also because of the Quanji Seven people's escape and the demonic seeds' abnormalities that stimulated Prince to slowly awaken. In the past few months, her fake personality's martial arts had also improved by leaps and bounds. It was only until today's battle in the imperial capital, where the Quanji Seven people had died in battle one by one, that she had been continuously stimulated by the disappearance of the demonic seeds, that she had completely awakened. Otherwise, she would probably only truly awaken after she had recovered all of her powers. Despite this, after over 10 years of recuperation, and especially after the world's metamorphosis, she had still managed to recover a portion of her powers from 1,000 years ago. Moreover, if the prince had said such domineering words about wanting Fang Xinjian to marry her, it would be extremely normal for an emperor to say these words to a beauty. However, now that it was said by such a charming and extremely feminine lady, it gave Fang Xinjian a strange feeling. As if seeing the strange look in Fang Xinjian's eyes, Prince let out a cold snort and said calmly, "You're not convinced? If I were a man and you were a woman, would you feel that what I said just now was reasonable? The reason why you find it strange has nothing to do with our powers or our background. It's only because I'm a woman and you're a man. Am I right?" Fang Xinjian did not reply, but in Prince's eyes, his attitude was a tacit admission. Prince sighed. "I had initially thought that you wouldn't be so pedantic since you're able to break through the continent's martial arts boundaries and create your own path, opening up a path that no one has ever taken before. I didn't expect that from the looks of it now, you're still tied down by the values of the mortal world." Hearing Prince's words, Heizi and Shirako's expressions changed. This was because they deeply understood how terrifying their leader was. They also knew that what she hated the most was people looking at her differently just because she was a woman. It didn't matter if they looked down on her or thought too highly of her. At the thought of this, Heizi could not help but think of Prince's background. Prince was born in a secular dynasty in the Western land and belonged to the emperor's family. She had lived a luxurious life since she was young and was doted on by many. Despite this, Prince had displayed unparalleled talent since she was young. Be it in poetry or martial arts cultivation, she had progressed at a tremendous pace, far surpassing her older and younger brothers. However, her identity as a woman ultimately limited her growth. When she turned 18, she was to be married off by her father, while her brothers began to fight for the position of prince. It was also in that year that Prince killed her husband on the night of her wedding. She then charged into the imperial city alone with a sword and asked her father a question. Why can't a woman be a prince or an emperor? Although Prince was extremely talented and had outstanding talent, she was still too young and was suppressed by the many experts in the dynasty. However, just as she was about to be executed, an important character in the higher realm outside of the Western Land's secular dynasty took a liking to her aptitude. In the sky above the imperial capital, as Prince finished her words, the cloud layers in the sky seethed, and dark clouds slowly came encompassing down. As the cloud layers seethed, gusts of cold wind descended from the sky. The entire world seemed to have turned bleak, filled with a cold and lonely feeling. At the sight of this scene, Fang Xinjian frowned slightly. It was because through his high-dimensional vision, neither the wind nor the clouds had been suppressed by the martial will. Instead, they had naturally changed according to the other party's emotions. On the other side, the crown princess moved, and her entire body shone with hints of golden light. At this moment, it was as if she had a charter in her mouth. She stood on yin and yang, and every single move she made could cause the entire world to change. Simultaneously, the world trembled, and the entire space seemed to be trembling along with the prince's martial will. The entire area was filled with the prince's voice. Fang Xinjian, since you're unwilling to be my man, then die. As she spoke, golden light burst out, turning into a huge golden hand that slapped out fiercely toward Fang Xinjian. Take this. Royal Heavenly Great Palm Imprint. Without relying on any external forces, the huge palm imprint that was condensed purely from the martial will pressed down explosively. The huge palm imprint seemed to want to encompass the entire imperial capital, and the surging power seemed to want to completely destroy and crush the entire southwestern region. Chapter 1004. Wherever the huge palm imprint passed by, the sky would turn pure pitch black. It was as if the end of the universe had descended from the sky, wanting to wipe out all life on the ground completely. The prowess of this huge palm imprint was even stronger than the combined strength of the other Quanji 7 people multiplied by 10. Fang Xinjian understood at this moment that the Quanji 7 people had probably always viewed the prince as the center. As long as the prince was still alive, it did not matter even if the rest of them were to die. Faced with the huge palm imprint that descended from the sky, Fang Xinjian did not back off at all. He understood that if this huge palm imprint were to land on the imperial capital, then the entire imperial capital, no, the entire central region, or even a large part of the empire, would probably turn into dust. The entire southwestern region of Miracle World would shatter into countless pieces and sink into the sea. It could even bring forth an unprecedented tsunami and flood that would engulf the world. Other places in the world would also experience great earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The entire human world would be destroyed under this attack. This was an overt scheme. Fang Xinjian relied on open and above-board power to sweep down. Other than taking it head-on, there was no other way. It could be said that each and every move of the prince was filled with the air of royalty and the domineering aura of a sovereign. Therefore, Fang Xinjian swung out his arm, and his martial will at 8,500 points condensed into one. It eventually turned into a stream of black sword intent that blended with the sword realm's high-dimensional attack and shot out. The black sword shadow soared into the sky, piercing abruptly into the center of the royal heavenly great palm imprint. A series of strong gales howled and thunderbolts exploded. Then they were engulfed by countless black spatial gaps. Without any sound or presence, A loud sound seemed to ring out in the minds of everyone who saw this scene. As the sword shadow and the palm collided, the space within a range of 1,000 lis trembled fiercely. Even time seemed to have come to a standstill at this moment. The collision was like a collision between Mars and Earth. Gales that exceeded Category 8 spread out from the point of impact, sweeping across the entire continent in the next few hours. Even the clouds in the sky above the continent would be swept away. The imperial capital was unscathed, but the land outside the city walls that was not protected by Fang Xinjian's space teleportation was directly bombarded into a wasteland by the aftermath of the clash between the two. All the grass, trees, and mountains seemed to have been struck by an invisible force and collapsed with a loud bang, forcefully flattening the ground. Everything within a 100-kilometer radius had been turned into a neat plain, and even people thousands of kilometers away could feel the intense tremors. Just a shockwave that was less than a 10,000th of its power was already so powerful. Fang Xinjian, who was at the center of the collision, let out a muffled groan as his entire body exploded in the air. Only after that did he reassemble. He raised his head and looked at the prince who was standing proudly. He said in astonishment, "What a powerful martial will!" Right now, Fang Xinjian possessed the high-dimensional attack ability. Even if he were to deal with a Tier 6 divine-level expert, it would still be like an airplane fighting against a tank. He had an incomparable advantage. When the high-dimensional attack landed on the enemy's body, it would ultimately take effect. It would still be a realistic attack like kinetic energy or heat energy. It would be a collision between martial wills. Right now, the martial will that prince displayed was clearly even stronger than Fang Xinjian's. This meant that although Fang Xinjian possessed the high-dimensional attack ability, he was unable to gain an advantage in the fight. Moreover, in a clash between martial wills, Fang Xinjian was even at a disadvantage. Although your sword arts are unconventional, able to point straight to the essence and slay the source, in the end, it's still an unconventional sword art. Prince looked at Fang Xinjian and slowly commented on his sword art. Your foundation is too weak, and your source isn't strong. How can you win against me in a battle of martial wills? In a battle of martial arts, the will is the most important. Your source isn't strong, so what's the use of having so many tricks? Competing in martial wills had always been something that Prince excelled in. The royal heavenly great art that she cultivated was known as the #1 cultivation technique amongst those of the same generation in terms of magical powers. It had an extremely strong effect on the cultivation of one's martial will. Right now, even though she had yet to recover all of her powers, her martial will had already surpassed 10,000 points. She could easily suppress Fang Xinjian. As she spoke, many huge golden hand imprints appeared behind the prince. They either formed palms, clenched fists, pinched fingers, or formed seals. There were all sorts of densely packed golden palms, like there were a myriad of them appearing behind the prince. At the sight of this scene, Fang Xinjian's countenance changed slightly. Die. The prince's voice once again rang out in the sky. It was like a god's judgment, bringing about endless despair. At the next moment, densely packed golden palm imprints came pressing down. Each palm imprint had the power to tear apart the imperial capital, destroy the central region, and cause an unprecedented earthquake. It could be said that if Fang Xinjian were to miss out on any of the palm imprints, the entire empire would be finished. Therefore, a myriad of sword intents instantly appeared in void space, shooting out toward the myriad of royal heavenly great palm imprints. In that instant, it was as if the stars in the sky had exploded, and it was as if a myriad of thunderbolts were roaring. The sword and palms clashed, and countless golden palms either slapped, pinched, or smashed. Very soon, they suppressed the sword intents that Fang Xinjian had performed. As the two gushes of power collided, it was as if there were a myriad of divine-level experts fighting at the same time. Overwhelming forces, spatial cracks, and shock waves came scattering down like raindrops. Although Fang Xinjian had used his full power, he was still at a disadvantage under the prince's attacks. At the sight of this scene, the immortal child and Seiko Kaitian also let out a furious bellow. Streams of white light burst out from their bodies, and they joined the battle. The light giants that the 10 guardian kings had turned into bellowed toward the sky, and streams of light cannons shot out from their mouths. They were like streams of positron cannons, annihilating martial will along the way and shooting out toward the royal heavenly great palm imprints in the sky. However, even though the Holy Sea of Truth was also helping Fang Xinjian, the prince merely let out a cold snort, and the number of royal heavenly great palm imprints increased once again. Golden light shone through the sky, dyeing everything physical in a layer of gold. All sorts of attacks turned into dust under the violent suppression of the royal heavenly great palm imprint. To think that the prince had managed to suppress everyone's joint attack single-handedly. Is it useful just because we have more people? Then what's the point of me cultivating? Hazy stood behind the crown princess, watching the scene of the crown princess using absolute power to suppress her opponent. Hazy felt extremely agitated, and it was as if he had returned to 1,000 years ago, when they had followed the crown princess to dominate the world and dominate the world. Just as the endless golden light came pressing down and was about to kill Fang Xinjian and the others, sinking the entire southern part of the world, Fang Xinjian's gaze narrowed slightly, and killing intent gushed out crazily. Streams of black sword marks extended out from his fingertip. However, just then, a voice rang out in his mind. Don't use this move first. Erbian? Even if you can win if you fight against her, the price you have to pay will be too great. The commotion will be too great, and it will bring about unnecessary trouble that will affect our future plans. Leave the rest to me. Chapter 1005. They had thought that the extraordinary son, who had obtained the White Emperor Zenith sword with 14 sections and had even cleared the hurdle of Tier 6 of the divine level, would be able to dominate the entire world. In the bug nest in another world, the purple mage king frowned as she looked at the situation on the battlefield. She said, "What on earth is this woman's background? How can she be this powerful? Even if she's at Tier 6 of the divine level, isn't this too exaggerated?" Although it was not as if Fang Xinjian had no way of killing the prince, he was unable to ensure the safety of the several tens of millions or even billions of people under his feet. "Let me out!" Amidst the furious bellows, the royal heavenly great palm imprint slapped down fiercely onto the black paper. However, even such an attack was unable to break through the black paper. There was not even the slightest tremor. "Who is it?" Fang Xinjian looked at the prince who had been sealed into the two-dimensional world and asked, "Aren't we going to kill her?" When the prince appeared, his extremely majestic martial will made everyone's hearts tremble. The chaos which even suspected that he would be able to sink the entire southern part of the world just by relying on the violent release of his martial will. However, her resistance did not last for too long. In less than a second, she stopped recovering, and the myriad of thunderbolts and flames disappeared simultaneously. "Damn it, I've reached my limits." Seiko Kaitian let out a sigh and started to think of a way out. Faced with the prince's explosive bellow, there was no reply from the sky. With the appearance of her martial will, the ether particles started to become chaotic and disorderly. Endless thunderbolts and flames appeared in the sky, and it was as if the entire world had become terrified because of her fury. Her powerful martial will allowed her to not be at a disadvantage in any of the confrontations. At the next moment, the endless pressure disappeared completely, and the world regained its silence. There's no need. In the future we'll need her battle prowess. Moreover, don't you want to know about the Western Land's method of converting one's lifespan and strength? The Holy Sea of Truth is still useful. I'll bring her away first. You'll have to appease the Empire. On the other side, the prince already had the upper hand. Streams of great yellow palm imprints scattered down like a meteor shower, suppressing everyone until they kept on retreating. Who is it? If one wished to kill a Tier 6 divine level expert, they would have to wipe out all of the other party's martial will. No matter what means they used, they would have to clash with the other party's martial will. At the same time, thousands of large golden hands suddenly appeared behind the prince. They turned into hand seals in various postures, surrounding and protecting the prince. Even the 10 guardian kings had shattered, and a large part of their martial wills had been shattered. The immortal child and Seiko Kaitian had also reached their limit. Their martial wills were slowly being wiped out, dissipating into the air. At this moment, the prince was simply like a queen that controlled the entire world, and her delicate body emitted waves of soul-stirring charm. Without any sound, without any screams, without any resistance, Heizi and Shirako had already been crushed by this terrifying pressure. On the black paper, the prince glared at Fang Xinjian, not letting go. Her face was flushed red from anger, and her chest kept on heaving up and down. This was something that looked like a piece of black paper. The only amazing thing was that this piece of black paper seemed to be a passageway to another world. The prince could be seen staying inside, slapping the paper crazily. However, it was like slapping on bulletproof glass. There was no effect at all. Fighting against the heavens. Fang Xinjian, who appeared next, was even more amazing. His unimaginable sword arts caused the 6 of them to be utterly defeated and thrown into disarray. Sealed in a two-dimensional world, unless the other party obtained the ability to ascend to a higher dimension, they would be trapped inside forever. As an explosive crackle rang out, a wave that could be seen by the naked eye descended from the sky. It was as if the distance between the world and the earth had shrunk by a few meters. As she let out a furious roar, a seemingly solid golden light shot out from her body, forcefully repelling the oppressive force. She actually began to slowly recover despite the pressure. Simultaneously, a series of incantations were transmitted into Fang Xinjian's mind. The chaos which let out a sigh, feeling a little speechless. Divine-level experts would be able to break through ordinary spatial seals sooner or later by relying on spatial translocation. The prince was also instantly pressed down by this invisible pressure until he became distorted. He was like a noodle that kept on twisting in midair. Scram out! It was as if they had been struck by an invisible hammer that could not be seen by the naked eye. They were instantly pressed into a thin sheet and then turned into a myriad of light spots that dissipated in the sky. However, he had not expected that 6 ridiculously strong people from the Western land would appear out of nowhere. All of them had reached Tier 6 of the divine level, and they had beaten up the extraordinary sun to the point where he could not retaliate at all. As this wave of pressure pressed down from the heavens, the prince was once again compressed crazily, instantly turning into a thin piece of black screen that was about the size of a palm. It floated down toward Fang Xinjian with a slight breeze. Dimensionality reduction? Fang Xinjian pursed his lips. Even he was astonished by this move of Urbian's. This was clearly not an ordinary spatial seal. It was a force that could lower the other party from the 3-dimensional world to the 2-dimensional world and even seal them in a 3-dimensional world. Fang Xinjian reached out and took this item that looked like a leaflet. Just as everyone was astonished by the prince's unbelievably strong martial will, an inexplicable pressure suddenly descended from the sky on the battlefield. The prince raised her head and looked toward the sky. She felt a pressure that penetrated deep into her bones, giving her the urge to escape. However, with her pride, how could she possibly escape? Instead, 2 beams of golden light shot out from her eyes, sweeping out toward the entire sky. Fang Xinjian took a closer look. Right now, the prince had become purely 2-dimensional. There was only length and width, no height or height, forming a strange life form. It was as if she was a person in a painting. Therefore, he asked directly, "What do you plan on doing?" Fang Xinjian, What means did you use earlier? Tell me so that I can understand why I lost. This is the incantation for unsealing and resealing. As long as you recite the incantation, you'll be able to release her or take her back, Erbian said. Fang Xinjian was asking how he planned on dealing with the prince, but Erbian's reply was about his next goal. Even Fang Xingjianai had no choice but to admit that such means were simply amazing. The prince let out an enraged bellow that was like a star exploding. The entire space started to seethe due to this intense energy change. An astonishing martial will kept on bursting out from her body like a blazing star. After all, at Tier 6 of the divine level, the physical body and conjured physique were no longer as important. A person's martial will was their true form, and they did not have any vital point. There was no reply, no fluctuation, and no warning. A strong pressure came crashing down on him, as if he was really being trampled on. Fang Xinjian's eyes lit up, and he looked at the prince in his hand with great interest. Fang Xinjian fell silent for a moment. It was true that the abilities that the prince displayed were very strong. Most importantly, the prince did not rely on any amazing martial arts or great skills. Instead, it was the power of a type of origin source. Chapter 1006. Fang Xinjian looked at the prince in his hand and frowned. He felt that it was very troublesome to deal with such a rebellious and powerful woman. After giving it some thought, he decided to roll up the black piece of paper. Ignoring the prince's furious bellow, he swallowed it into his martial will and then looked at everyone present. Right now, the many experts present were looking at Fang Xinjian as if they were looking at a god. It was because Erbian's series of means from earlier were too unbelievable and unbelievable. Fang Xinjian had caught the black piece of paper in the end. To everyone, this was the means that Fang Xinjian had performed. The 10 guardian kings from the Holy Sea of Truth had returned to their original states. They stood together behind the 2 saints and looked at Fang Xinjian nervously. There was no way they could not be nervous. The battle prowess that Fang Xinjian had displayed had far surpassed their expectations. Seiko Kaitian brought along the extraordinary son, who was seriously injured and unconscious, and looked at Fang Xinjian, who was in the sky with a complicated countenance. The immortal child sighed softly. Erbian had also communicated with him. He had left with the 14 sections of the White Emperor Zenith Sword, leaving him and Fang Xinjian to deal with the remaining matters. The immortal child cupped his hands toward Fang Xinjian and said with a solemn expression, "It's all thanks to the Imperial Preceptor's righteous actions in this calamity. You defeated the 7 demons and saved everyone from the calamity. You can be said to have saved the entire world. We've also suffered great losses in this battle. We won't say any unnecessary words today. After we've recuperated, we'll definitely pay a visit to thank you personally in the future." At the next moment, accompanied by a series of spatial translocation, the 10 guardian kings and the 3 saints turned into a stretch of white light and disappeared into the sky, completely disappearing without a trace. Fang Xinjian took a step forward and returned before the 4th prince and the others. Appease the people and make arrangements for the various major influences. I still have some matters to attend to. After handing over the task of appeasing the people in the imperial capital to the 4th prince and the others, Fang Xinjian returned to the secret chamber in the palace, leaving behind the 4th prince and the others who were exchanging glances. With Fang Xinjian's departure, the experts from the other major influences felt as if a huge burden had been lifted off their hearts. An intense pressure disappeared from their bodies. Very soon, many divine-level experts surrounded the 4th prince and the others. All of them were expressing their goodwill and showing weakness to the empire. Clearly, the powers that Fang Xinjian had displayed earlier had shocked them. People like the Sea Monarch wore a fawning expression, relying on his Tier 5 divine-level abilities to squeeze into the innermost position. He grabbed onto the 4th prince's hand, not letting go, and said agitatedly, "Your Highness, please let me join the Empire." The various overseas tribes have admired the Empire for a long time. As for the various countries' royalty and factions who had been under the Church in the north, they, Fang, imperial capital, Xian, Empire, King, Wang, and they, putting aside how they were going to clean up the mess in the imperial capital. After Fang Xinjian returned to the secret chamber, he immediately took out the black piece of paper that had sealed the prince. The prince in the black piece of paper seemed to have regained her composure. She sat down cross-legged, looked at Fang Xinjian coldly, and said, "Tell me, what do you want from me by sealing me up?" Fang Xinjian smiled. However, it was impossible for him to directly ask about the most important method of converting one's lifespan and strength. He merely said calmly, "Tell me about your background first." The prince raised her brows, feeling extremely aggrieved. Even when she had been sealed up by Adam and the others 1,000 years ago, she had not been dealt with like this. However, at the thought of how she had been sealed up, even she felt a hint of astonishment in her heart. Therefore, she fell silent for a moment before eventually saying, "All right, there's nothing to hide anyway." The prince then gave a rough account of her background and encounters. In the end, she asked, "Are you satisfied now?" Fang Xinjian nodded. The environment in the Western land was different from Miracle World. It was a world where countless immortal sects and demon sects coexisted. There were both higher and lower realms, and there were even many Tier 8 and 9 divine level experts who had survived. However, the people whom Fang Xinjian had encountered in the past were all descendants of people from the Western land who had come to this world. Moreover, they were all descendants of people from the lower realms. However, the prince was different. She was born in a secular dynasty in the lower realm and later cultivated in a top-notch immortal sect in the higher realm. Therefore, she had a great understanding of the Western land, and Fang Xinjian obtained even more important information about the Western land from her. It was the same as what Fang Xinjian had learned from the immortal child in the past. The Western land was divided into the higher realm and the lower realm. This was due to the appearance of the technique to convert lifespan and strength. It allowed experts to join forces and monopolize most of the cultivation resources so as to increase their strength cultivation speed. This would then be converted into lifespan, allowing them to live longer. These top-notch powerhouses and sects formed the so-called upper realm. The higher realm and the secular world had almost severed all connections. Every sect in the higher realm had very strict requirements for taking in disciples. It was because taking in disciples meant that more people would be taking away cultivation resources. The decrease in cultivation resources meant that the growth of one's strength would slow down, and the slower growth of one's strength would mean that one's lifespan would be shorter than before. From this, one could imagine how harsh the higher realm was when it came to taking in disciples and fighting over cultivation resources. The secular world was the lower realm. They knew almost nothing about the existence of the higher realm. Unless the world underwent a metamorphosis, there would only be Tier 1 divine level expert. It was because the higher realm strictly controlled the growth of the lower realm. The Mountainous Seas Book of the Way that Fang Xinjian had obtained from the eastern sand regions Wang clan came from a dynasty in the secular world. When this dynasty started to research the secret technique to convert strength and lifespan like the Mountainous Seas Book of the Way, it was naturally destroyed. The dynasty's destruction seemed to be the replacement of the old and new dynasties, but in fact, the higher realms experts were the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes. These were the Western land's higher realm and lower realm. The people in the higher realm were extremely powerful. Due to their long lifespans, the changes in their members were very slow. There were even quite a few Tier 8 or 9 divine level old monsters who had survived from the world's metamorphosis until now. With their powerful strength, they also took up most of the Western land's cultivation resources. As for the lower realm, although martial arts still circulated, without the world's metamorphosis, they would at most be able to reach Tier 1 of the divine level. If someone were to discover the technique to convert one's lifespan into strength, they would be put to death immediately. The sect that Prince belonged to was one of the 3 strongest immortal sects in the higher realm, the Ascendant Heavenly Sect. Hearing Prince's words, Fang Xinjian nodded, threw a glance at Prince and said, "It's not impossible for you to come out." Prince's eyes lit up abruptly, and a hint of a smile broke out on her beautiful face. It was so tempting that one would have the urge to kiss her. "What do I have to do for you to be willing to let me out?" Fang Xinjian said, "This seal is the ritual to undo the seal, but we'll need your cooperation." Simultaneously, he recalled the incantation that Erbian had told him. "All right, tell me and I'll do it," Prince said anxiously. "Sit down." Prince's eyes narrowed slightly and he asked, "What do you mean?" "Do as I say. Sit down." Prince let out a cold snort and sat down cross-legged. "Raise your hand." The Crown Prince frowned and raised one of his hands. "Roll." Fang Xinjian. The fury in Prince's eyes seemed to instantly materialize. She stood up abruptly and shouted, "You're messing with me?" As she moved too fiercely, her pair of breasts trembled intensely as if they were going to pop out at any moment. Chapter 1007. Seeing how exasperated the prince was, Fang Xinjian frowned and said, "Prince, forget it. I'll just call you Maria." The prince did not reply. He merely let out a cold snort and turned his head to the side, not looking in Fang Xinjian's direction at all. His face was filled with unwillingness to cooperate. "Maria." Fang Xinjian deliberated for a moment before saying, "I'm not lying to you. This is how this set of sealing technique is unsealed. If you're not willing to do this, even I won't be able to release you." Hearing Fang Xinjian's words, the prince's brows twitched abruptly, and his exquisite face was immediately filled with fury. Fang Xinjian looked at the silent prince, shook his head, and started to roll up the black paper. "Since you're not willing to come out, then forget it." "Wait a minute," the prince said anxiously. He glared at Fang Xinjian and said, "Remember what you said. If I discover that you're lying to me, no matter how much time I have to spend, I'll wipe out your entire clan." "Then are you going to do it or not?" Fang Xinjian asked. "I'm going to do it," the prince gritted his teeth and answered heavily. "Sit down. Raise your hand. Roll on the ground." The prince hesitated for a moment, and his countenance was as black as the bottom of a pot. However, he still landed on the ground and rolled one round. He then stood up with a slightly flushed face and said angrily, "Are you satisfied now? What else do you want to do next?" Fang Xinjian pressed his palm onto the black paper and said, "Lick my hand." Rumble. Golden Martial will surged forth, sweeping through void space with a world-shattering might. It was as if it wanted to destroy the entire two-dimensional world completely, but it was still unable to harm Fang Xinjian's palm in the slightest. The two seemed to be very close, but in reality, they would never be able to come into contact with each other. The prince narrowed his eyes, and his gaze was filled with killing intent. His fair cheeks were flushed with anger, and his huge chest was heaving up and down violently. "No one has ever dared to ask me to do such a thing. Now there is." Fang Xinjian said, "Hurry up and lick it. If you take more than a minute, you'll have to repeat what you did just now." "Ah! I'm going to kill you." Streams of royal heavenly great palm imprints smashed out, causing the surface of the black paper to ring out repeatedly. However, they were unable to affect the real world in the slightest. "You can't kill me," Fang Xinjian advised. "It's just licking my hand. It's better than eating sh*t. Are you sick? How can a seal be unsealed in such a way?" The crown princess grabbed her long golden hair and kept on tugging at it. She said crazily, "What on earth did you intend to use this sealing art for? Dog catcher?" "There's still 20 seconds, Fang Xinjian said. "I wasn't the one who designed this sealing technique. You just need to lick it a little." Don't even think about it. The prince clenched his fists tightly and looked at Feng Xinjian furiously. Feng Xinjian said helplessly, Maria, you and I are both Tier 6 divine level experts. Our bodies are just a habit. Are you going to restrict yourself because of the habits of mortals? You're the one who thought of not restricting yourself with the values of the world. And you should have noticed this as well, right? There's no way to replenish energy in the two-dimensional spacetime you're in. This means that there's no way to replenish your lifespan. If you're never willing to come out, you'll only die of old age in the end. Hearing this, the prince's countenance flickered. In this two-dimensional world created by Urbian, there was no way for her to replenish her energy. She could only keep on converting her lifespan into energy. This was the greatest threat to her right now, and it was also the reason why she had done that earlier. However, at the thought of having to lick Feng Xinjian's palm, she felt goosebumps all over her body. She could not help but feel disgusted. Feng Xinjian had no other choice either. He had too much information he wanted to get from the prince. However, it was useless to simply extort a confession from an existence like this. He had to do it bit by bit. Feng Xinjian continued, think about it. Right now, we're in different dimensions. It's just like how you won't be able to open up this passageway even if you keep attacking. If you were to lick, it would just be an action. It's impossible for you to really lick my palm. It was as if Feng Xinjian's words had really persuaded the prince, making this lady, who had once held great authority and had great ambitions, to let down her guard. Excellent, you're very good. Feng Xinjian, you'd better remember this. The prince made up her mind, closed her eyes, and stuck out her tongue. That small, bright red tongue looked long and soft. It was like a snake's tongue, licking toward Feng Xinjian's palm. At the next moment, a wet and slippery feeling came from Feng Xinjian's palm. It was as if a piece of jade had brushed past it. At the instant Prince completed this action, the black paper disappeared, and the prince appeared before Feng Xinjian. Her tongue was still on Feng Xinjian's palm. However, she reacted almost at the same instant that the seal was lifted. The martial will in her body started to wreak havoc like a star that had exploded. Streams of golden light shot out from her body as if they were material, as if wanting to tear everything before her into dust. Simultaneously, the prince formed seals with her hands, and streams of ecliptic great palm imprints took shape behind her back. They were about to attack Feng Xinjian. The prince's furious attack could crush the entire empire into dust. Even the continental shelves would be completely deformed, causing a great disaster that would last for several hundred years on the surface of the planet. However, just as the prince was about to make her move, Feng Xinjian's martial will swept out slightly, and a voice rang out in the prince's mind, "Go back!" In that instant, all the martial will that had surged out disappeared. The prince seemed to have been fixed in place by a terrifying pressure that had descended from the heavens. Her expression was distorted, and her body trembled. Then she was folded up time and time again, eventually being pressed into the two-dimensional world. All that was left was a piece of black paper that was slowly drifting down. The prince was furiously slapping the boundary between the two-dimensional space and the real world. It was as if she was a criminal slapping against a glass window. "Let me out! Maria, do you think that I'll let you attack me as you wish?" Feng Xinjian said. "I can let you out, but you must guarantee that after I let you out, you won't attack me or this world." The prince gritted her teeth and said, "I understand. I just couldn't hold it in earlier. You better calm down for a period of time first." With that, Feng Xinjian ignored the prince's shouts and clamors. He rolled up the black paper and stored it into his martial will. He understood that it was not so easy to subdue the prince. It would probably take some time for him to get her to tell him all her secrets obediently. Since he had succeeded in unsealing and resealing her for the first time, he would let her calm down for a period of time before communicating with her. He could also leave her hanging. Fang Xinjian understood very well that staying in that empty and dark two-dimensional world was a form of torture for every second. Therefore, he closed his eyes and started to think about the battle today. In particular, the scene where Erbian had sealed up the prince kept on replaying in his mind. Chapter 1008. Has Erbian already reached this stage? He has placed all of his physical body and will into the high-dimensional world. It's really amazing, but it's not my path. Fang Xinjian continued to deduce his sword arts in his mind. The experience from the battle today had given him even more inspiration and inspiration. After cultivating for a night, Fang Xinjian left the imperial capital and headed north. After the battle in the imperial capital, as the news spread out, there would probably not be many people in the entire world who would go against Fang Xinjian. With Erbian and the immortal child keeping the church in check, Fang Xinjian believed that the church would not want to get into a conflict with him. Therefore, Fang Xinjian now had two goals. One was to resolve the problem of his lifespan, and the other was to investigate the secret of the person who had given him his sword arts talent. In fact, these two goals complemented each other. Back then, it was the man in black who had given him the world's best sword arts talent. This was why his lifespan had been reduced back then, leaving him with only 1 year left to live. Therefore, in order to resolve the problem of his lifespan, the key lay with the man in black. If he could not resolve this, then the Western land's method of converting lifespan to strength would be his second choice. Fang Xinjian teleported all the way to the Holy Rune Institution and saw that the immortal child was already waiting there. Looking at Fang Xinjian, the immortal child smiled and said, "I knew you'd come." Fang Xinjian said, "Then you should know what I want to ask." Seiko Kaitian and the extraordinary son have already given in. 1 month later, I'll succeed as the Pope, the immortal child said, feeling a little emotional. All right. Right now, the 21 sections of the White Emperor Zenith sword are all in Erbian's hands. This guy is very mysterious all the time, and I have no idea what he's up to, the immortal child said with a smile. Oh, right. You've also heard what the Quanji 7 people said, right? The White Emperor Zenith sword has 28 sections. Fang Xinjian said, "Don't you have any records?" That's the strange part. With that, the immortal child's long robe lit up, and sections of information regarding the White Emperor Zenith sword appeared. However, even though this long robe was said to have recorded all the information regarding the Holy Sea of Truth, there were no records of the so-called 28 node. Either the Plenary Foundation Septet is spouting nonsense, or the Immortality Saint frowned, and there was a hint of solemnity in his expression. Someone tampered with the information. The person who was able to tamper with all the information regarding the White Emperor Zenith sword in the Holy Sea of Truth was clearly not an ordinary person. It was very likely that he was one of the higher-ups of the Holy Sea of Truth in the past. He might even be a pope. I got it. I'll ask the prince about the White Emperor Zenith sword's 28 sections. Fang Xinjian nodded and looked at the immortal child. With a tap of his finger, a stream of light and shadow entered the immortal child's mind. It was the image of a man dressed in black robes, and he was carrying a lady with fair skin. That lady lay quietly in the man's embrace. Even with her eyes closed, she still looked very elegant. However, what astonished the immortal child the most was that the lady's appearance was very similar to Fang Xinjian's. This is... A hint of doubt flashed in the immortal child's eyes. You don't know them either? Fang Xinjian said in disappointment. The immortal child shook his head. I'm sorry, I don't have any memories of them. Fang Xinjian sighed and continued, I want to find these two people. They should have come to the north of the world, or they might have come here in the past. They might even be someone from the church. Since you've inherited the position of the Pope, I hope that you can help me find these two people. The immortal child nodded. Don't worry. I'll send people to search for them. As long as they've come to the north, they'll definitely be found. Fang Shijian nodded. Then he discussed with the immortal child the matter of the Empire and the Church joining forces and working together. After all, the two strongest influences in the world would be the Empire and the Church. As long as the two parties could work together well, they would be able to manage the entire world. After confirming some matters regarding the collaboration, Fang Xinjian left the Holy Rune Institute, leaving the immortal child alone to look at the sky. There was a hint of complicated emotions in his gaze. Since Seiko Kaitian and the extraordinary sun have descended, the oath of our collaboration has actually been fulfilled. The immortal child narrowed his eyes slightly. He knew very well that the restraint between the two of them was gone. Their current collaboration was just a form of inertia and balance. Once someone broke the balance, it would be followed by an earth-shattering battle. With Erbian around, the situation shouldn't reach the worst stage. However, the immortal child frowned at the thought of what Erbian was going to do next. But we still have to be prepared for the worst, Fang Xinjian. The thought of how Fang Xinjian had single-handedly suppressed 6 of the Quanji 7 people with his sword made the immortal child wary. Right now, Erbian is probably the only one who can suppress him in this world. But if he were to make another breakthrough, right now, Erbian no longer had the reinforcements from the ring's energy. The immortal child was not confident that he would be able to continue suppressing Fang Xinjian. At the thought of this, a hint of determination flashed in his gaze. After Fang Xinjian left the church, he found a random spot and landed down. He sensed a little in his heart. After the cunning hare is done, the hound is cooked. After the birds are done, the fine bough is hidden. Right now, the great enemy is gone. The two strongest influences in this world are only the Empire and the Church. The conflict between the two will erupt one day. It's just that I don't know when that will be. At the thought of the possibility that he might have to make an enemy out of Erbian, a hint of excitement flashed in Fang Xinjian's eyes. It was true that Fang Xinjian was very strong, but only an expert like this would be able to rouse Fang Xinjian's fighting spirit. With my current strength, I won't need the cooperation of others to strive for Tier 7 of the Divine level. It's not impossible for me to even reach Tier 8 of the Divine level. Looking at the sealed prince, Fang Xinjian made a decision. He was going to make good use of this time to strive for Tier 7 of the Divine level or even for Tier 8 of the Divine level, allowing his strength to increase by leaps and bounds. From Tier 7 of the Divine level onward, he would be developing in the direction of controlling time. It would be greatly beneficial to his sword arts. Moreover, through the Church's method of choosing worlds, he would be able to get more time to cultivate and obtain information from the prince. The prince was related to many secrets, such as the method to transform one's lifespan into strength, the 28 sections of the White Emperor Zenith Sword, and the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures. This would be of great help to him in increasing his strength. Regardless of whether it was to search for the black-clothed man or to resolve the problem of one's lifespan, he would need powerful powers. Chapter 1009. In the north of the land was covered in snow and wind. Right now, the entire land was covered in silver. The land at the northernmost end of the land was covered in snow and wind all year round. The many tribes living in this land were constantly under the threat of hunger, cold, and disease. This made the people in the desolate north get used to fighting, killing, and enduring. This also caused an endless stream of experts to appear in each generation, even though there had never been a truly powerful and unified country established in this land. Right now, amidst the snow and wind, the location of a tribe was as warm as spring. It was because all the falling snow and wind would disappear the moment it got close to the tribe. The entire land where the tribe was located was still covered in green grass, and herds of cows and sheep could be seen. It was as if it was a different world from the cold outside. This place was where the Frostwolf tribe, the strongest tribe among the northern barbarians, which was known as the leader of the desolate north, was located. Countless warriors of the Frostwolf tribe were gathered in the center of the tribe. Their faces were filled with respect and submission as they looked at the center like they were looking at the god they worship. Right at the spot where these warriors were looking at, a silver-haired middle-aged man was sitting leisurely. There was a chessboard placed before him, and there were many chess pieces on it that were intersecting with each other. Right now, the entire chessboard was encompassed by layers of stacking, distorted space. One would need to have extremely strong vision to be able to see clearly that the chess pieces on the chessboard were actually many towering mountains. Each time a chess piece moved, many mountains would rise from the ground, and it could be said to be capable of moving mountains and overturning seas. Clearly, this chessboard had been formed by someone compressing space with great powers and throwing in many mountains. Just to play this game of chess, one would need to have the power to move mountains, and one would also need to be able to pass through the layers of stacking, distorted space. On the other side of the chessboard, Urbian sat opposite to the silver-haired middle-aged man. He controlled the mountains on the chessboard and said through his martial will, "Brother Yi, have you made up your mind?" The silver-haired middle-aged man looked at Urbian, and there was a hint of astonishment in his gaze. 3 days ago, the other party had suddenly descended and found him. After that, they had exchanged blows. Although he did not lose, he could tell that the other party had not used his full strength. In particular, the martial arts that the other party used could be said to be original and unique, forming a school of its own. It was different from any school of martial arts on the continent, yet it was unfathomable and had all kinds of inconceivable abilities. Following that, they discussed the Tao for 3 days. Up until now, he still hadn't been able to see through the slightest flaw of the other party. During these 3 days, the other party had kept him here and prevented him from attacking the imperial capital, which was tens of thousands of miles away. Although he had once promised someone that he would never leave the northern wilderness for the rest of his life, with his current strength, even if they were tens of thousands of miles apart, he could still attack as if he was right in front of him. However, compared to Urbian's strength, realm, and martial arts, what surprised Yi Jing even more was his identity. From another universe, the commander of the Silver Army? Yi Jing shook his head. It's too risky. On the other side, Urbian continued, "Brother Yi, with your aptitude, it's only a matter of time before you take that step. However, even if you reach Tier 9 of the divine level, you won't be able to change the situation of the entire multivariate universe. The universe is too vast. Even if you can grasp the formation of several thousand or 10,000 stars, even if you can grasp up to 100 galaxies, compared to the entire universe and the entire multivariate universe, it's still too insignificant." The entire multivariate universe. Yi Jing smiled and said, "That's not something we can worry about to begin with." "Maybe," Urbian continued, "but regardless of whether we can do it or not, this might be our best and last chance." Hints of complicated emotions and determination flashed in Urbian's eyes. After breaking free from the assimilation of the demonic gods and traversing through countless universes in time, he had learned a lot of information regarding the multivariate universe. The 13 demonic gods are existences that stand at the pinnacle of the entire multivariate universe. A single thought from them is enough to provide the entire world with the energy to perform black magic. The strongest expert among the 13 demonic gods is the formless and formless origin, which is also known as the god of universal truth. Under normal circumstances, our actions wouldn't be able to affect him at all. However, at this moment, due to the unprecedented transformation, he's at his weakest. Yi Jing did not say anything. With a soft rumble, another mountain on the chessboard landed on the ground. He had already placed another chess piece. As the Silver Mage King of the 12 factions, he naturally had some understanding toward black magic and the existence of demonic gods. The 12 factions of black magic in this world originated from the powers of the 12 demonic gods. Their archenemy, the Holy Sea of Truth, relied on the powers of another demonic god. These 13 demonic gods were the strongest existences in the entire multivariate universe. Each challenge after the divine level was a battle between the 13 demonic gods. In the endless multivariate universe, they used countless experts who could overturn rivers and seas and destroy the world as chess pieces, controlling the timelines of the multivariate universe. The changes and connections of the timelines created many embryonic forms of the loops of time. It was like an unprecedented game of chess. As the many experts placed their chess pieces, the loops of time were formed one after another. Once they were sealed by the loops of time, large areas of the worlds and the demonic gods' powers would be sealed, entering an eternal cycle. It was like a game of Go. It was just that the entire multivariate universe was the chessboard, countless top-notch experts were the chess pieces, and the loops of time were the means to seal up one world after another. In this game of chess, the flames of war between the 13 demonic gods had already spread out to the ends of spacetime and thought. Urbian said, "This world has already entered the 7th onslaught. There's not much time left. We might not be able to defeat them, but we can at least take back this world from their hands. But what you're doing is too risky. I only see a 1 in 10,000 chance," Yi Jing said with a frown. To the demonic gods, even a 1 in 100 million chance is too much, let alone a 1 in 10,000 chance, Urbian said. Moreover, other than me there can still be others. It's not just you. There are also the other mage kings, as well as all the hidden characters. If we can gather everyone's powers, we might still be able to succeed. But the chances are still slim. It's impossible to convince them with just this. Yi Jing's eyes stared unwaveringly at Ulpian as he enunciated each word clearly, and once it fails, it could bring about a devastating disaster. The path you're walking on is no longer the path of justice but vengeance. Urbian did not say anything. It was true that he was unable to convince Fang Xinjian on this point. He only said in a low voice, "Just once will do. Even if I die immediately after winning, I must still win against him once." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.